just a brief introduction. Grant Cameron is one of my favorite UFO researchers because of the passion he has for this subject. He tracked every U.S. president and their association with UFOs. It's in the UFO White House.com files. And he was actually sucked down the rabbit hole, as they say, 1975 with the Charlie Red Star sighting in Canada. And that put you on this journey that you're still with us. You've taken some time out. You've done some research. He's written some fantastic books. You have a new book coming out about disclosure. So, thanks so much. Anything you want to say about Grant, Neil? Because he's one of our best.
It's good to see you, Grant. It's been a long time, so I'm just excited to see how you've been and what you've been up to. So we're ready for it.
Okay. And he also has a chapter in this book, Making Contact, where he talks about the wow factor. Great contribution. So yeah, talk to us, Grant. Thanks so much for being here.
Okay, thanks. So let's see if you can help me get through this presenting here. Just share screen.
Yeah. Share screen and then click entire screen. Then select the screen and click share.
This is, I've got about 3 or 4 books that are coming out. One has just come out called Beyond Managing Magic, Landing the Plane, where I got a sort of an intuitive message. You get frustrated in this field and, when is this thing all going to unravel? And basically it comes down to the phenomena, whatever it is running the show. And they basically said to me, don't worry, we know how to land the plane. So that's the 4th book of the disclosure I've done. And the 5th book I'm going to do is a book on very controversial. I'm going to say I don't want the U.S. government to disclose. I'm not in favor of that, especially when you get in Canada now. I live in Canada, and 27% of people in Canada consider the United States an enemy now, and in Greenland, 85% of people consider the U.S. a threat. So the last thing we want is the U.S. military having any more weapons, which they can drop on my grandson. So that's for the 5th book. But what it says is we want disclosure, and true disclosure is to go to the experiencers, not to the government. The government, this whole operation that's going on now in front of Congress, if you'll see, Michael brought up the fact that it should be brought in front of science. So when this thing went public, who did they go to? Did they go to the Science and Technology Committee in the House and the Senate? No, they went to Armed Services and Intelligence. That's all weapons. This is a move to get funding for weapon programs, and that's what we need. The message is oneness coming from the intelligence, and that's going to come if you start listening to the experiencers. I've said that all along. The only thing you can learn about lights in the sky is to know that something's going on. When you got to talk to people who are dealing with the intelligence itself, and there's a lot of these people running around, and they tell some very interesting stories, which I'll sort of relate to today. The other thing I always want to remind people of is that the phenomena is morphing. It is not the same phenomena. It keeps changing. This is 1896, the year that radioactivity was discovered. This massive flap in Europe and the United States, and the phenomena appears to us according to our experiences. Michael, Shirley, no, hang on. The experiencer in California, who's the stepson of Barbara Streisand, told me that he's dealing with the experiences, with the phenomena. He said that what they told him is, when we come into your world, we go into your head and we find out what's in your head, and whatever's in your head, that's what we build a lesson with. And that's why you see that the phenomena since 1896 has morphed. It was started with the airships. And I say, anybody who thinks this is extraterrestrial, these guys said they were from Mars. And I say, if you really believe this is extraterrestrial, do you actually believe that these things flew through the vacuum of time and space on a wooden ship with propellers on it and came from Mars? And this thing is that they're morphing as we develop our intelligence. This phenomenon keeps changing. It was this, then it was the green fire, the Foo Fighters, then it was green fireballs, then it was the Bell ships of Adamski, then came in the Greys in 1961, then came the triangles, then came the crop circles, and then came the cattle mutilations. And this thing is morph. They just keep turning the pages, and we watch as they land the plane. They know what they've done. They've probably done this on 1,000 different planets. They know exactly what they're doing and how they're disclosing this phenomena, whatever it might be. this is a book. There's actually a book on all the different types of beings. And if you look before 1961, there are no grays. I don't care what anybody says. You get all these things. One's got a long nose. One looks like a mummy. Seem not to have a head. Dwarfs, well proportioned. There was one even with corduroy pants on. And you look and you see that there are no two aliens that basically look the same. They all basically the same. And what you see is this reflection from the 1940s and 1950s is you'll see aliens, short, humanoid with helmet. You'll see helmets with visors, with hoses going down into tubes on the back. This is all science fiction cartoons, stuff from the 1940s and 50s that is reflecting what we believe. And when we go into fear, you're going to see one type of being, and if you see angelic, you're going to see these etheric type beings. And we forget the thing that was said by Wheeler. This is a participatory world. We are part of the phenomena that we're watching. And so I started looking at, I'm writing a book called Extraterrestrial or Maybe Not. And this is the sort of the phenomena that when you look at, you mentioned before the Billy Meyer sightings. And Billy Meyer, everybody said, oh, and Billy Meyer, he's hanging these things from strings. No problem. That's what he's doing. He has these models. And then, of course, they digitalized the thing and they blew it up so you could see the string, and there was no string there. But when you start looking at the encounters with the beings, what you suddenly realize, especially the grays, is you see these strings. You go like, what? Something's going on. This doesn't make any sense. For example, breathing. When Jacobs talked about them doing the mind scan, where the gray would look directly into the person's eyes, be about 1 inch away from the person's head, he would always say to them, "Is he breathing?" And they'd go, "No, he's not breathing." So if he's not breathing, is this an extraterrestrial being from another planet? Has no nose, has no mouth, no eyelids, has these big, huge eyes. But how do you keep the dirt out of the eyes? But it doesn't have eyelids. This is like a string. It's like, maybe something's wrong here. Maybe this should tell us that maybe we're dealing with something different. Aging. I asked Betty Andreas and her husband. They had their first UFO encounter with an alien in 1946. And I talked to them when they were in the 80s. And I said, Betty, I mean, you had a first encounter in 46. Did the alien ever get any older? And then her husband said, no, he never got any older, but aliens live a long time. And that's what you'll find. If you ask people their whole life, they had an encounter with a single being. And the weird thing is, I even bypassed everything. I said, were you on the ship? Yeah. Who's the guy you were dealing with? Who's the main guy you were dealing with? And they always have a name for the guy. There's all the little grays around. They don't talk to them. There's one person that seems to be talking to. And a lot of them will say, for example, Chris Bledsoe. They asked Chris Bledsoe in the transcript that I had. Chris lost it. I provided him the transcript for his book. In the transcript of his 2008 regression, they asked him, when did you first encounter these beings? And you got to remember, he was a deacon in a very strict Pentecostal church. So he was very Christian oriented and no idea of reincarnation. And they asked him, when did you first encounter these beings? He said, they have been with me since before I was born. And then the regressionist from Harvard, a friend of John Mack, said, in your last lifetime? And he said, yes. So if they're in our last lifetime, if these beings are in our last, then you got to reconsider as to what are these beings? What's really going on here? If you look at the alien autopsy, I released the alien autopsy document, which I thought was the most important document I had ever seen. And everybody just sort of ignored it. Kit Green actually admitted that all the stuff was true. And in the alien autopsy, they supposedly recreated the being from damaged film. And if you look on the alien autopsy being, you'll see it doesn't have a belly button. Well, that was what people report on I ask him, does he have a belly button? Nope, doesn't have a belly button. And then I say, does he have sex organs? And he goes, most people say, no, he didn't have sex organs. And I go, doesn't that seem kind of strange to you that he's a biological being and he's here and they're raping women and they don't have sex organs? And I go, yeah, it is kind of weird. Never thought of that before. Or they don't have any clothes on. Like, why don't they have clothes? I don't know. I never thought about that. Don't have any clothes on. Or they have clothes that's like spray painting. The clothes like spray painting. Nobody's ever seen the toilet, so they don't have a waste system. They don't seem to eat. They don't seem to drink. And the weirdest one that I have is people will describe, I don't know how they stood up on these legs. They're like, they're sticks. It was unbelievable. And their arms are like sticks. And they have no tendons and no muscles. And I don't care what anybody says. You cannot move a leg without a muscle. It's muscles and tendons. That's how you move the leg. So how are they moving their legs if they don't have any muscles and tendons? And the thing with guns, that people will talk about shooting these beings, and the beings flip over, and they disappear, or they just walk off, and you can't kill them, or they go through walls and windows. And then you got to start saying, what are we really dealing with? And when you look at it, it's like everything else in nature, it gets more complex and more complex and more complex and more complex. And if you take a look at the people at the level like James Lukatsky, who ran the OSAP program, he will tell you that this thing is unbelievably complex in terms of what we're actually dealing with here. This is this reflection idea that people will talk about grays, reptilians, mantids. And I did 3 books on the Mission Rama, the opening these portals, they call Zendras at Mount Shasta. And there's 3 of the best cases I ever had. One had 6 witnesses inside the Zendra, 7 inside the Zendra. One had 8, one had 9. People levitated into the air with hundreds of beings, more beings than there was trees in the forest. And they were levitated into the air, and these beings were all around them. 9 witnesses. I interviewed 3 of them. And what you see from them, they're very religious. They're Roman Catholic, Latino people. And what you see, you don't see grays and reptilians. You see these like people that just popped out of the Bible. And this is Ann Terrell, who they all have they're all muscular, look like swimmers. And Ann Terrell in 2014 appeared 7 witnesses, and they all said, yeah, he was there, and he was 10 feet tall. And I stood like about 15 feet from the tree where this guy was sitting, and these people were all in different locations inside the Zendra looking at him, and he was giving different message to everybody. Was getting a different message from him. And then in 2015, he appeared again. And a lot of the same people were in the Zendra. And one guy who was a Navy guy from 24 years, I said to him, I said, hey, you were in there? And he was just an interpreter. He wasn't supposed to be in the Zendra. I said, hey, were you in there? And he said, yeah. And I said, they said it was this year. He was a hologram. You could see through him and the 2 beings that he was with. And he said, he was not. What do you mean? Where do you get that from? I said, well, that's what all the other 7 people said. He said, look, Grant, I was close enough. I could see the lines in his face. It was not a hologram. It was a real thing. So you see people inside the Zendra seeing different things. And that's this idea of reflection. This is the commander of the craft, again, a woman, and almost like it could be a biblical figure. And we got to remember, we are part of what we're experiencing. There is no separation. It's all one thing. Here's a thing. This is the first time I ever showed this, and I'll do it pretty quickly. If you take a look, everybody says, oh, the grays. And if you start actually looking at the grays, okay, here's Betty Hill's gray. Take a good look at it and then compare it with Whitley Strieber's gray. Does it look the same? No, it's not even close. If you look at the other one that Whitley Strieber put out, nope, not even close. Look, here's Betty Andreassen's gray. Does it look the same as the others? No, it doesn't look the same. It has all these different figures. And this is this whole idea that in the end, I think it's going to be that all the grays, all the UFOs, and all the power systems are all going to be different. And this is something I'll get into when I talk about the people flying the ship. Here's the Crowley, the lamb that everybody said, oh, it was a gray. He was dealing with a gray. It looks similar, but not at all close. Here's, I can't remember where this one comes from. Oh, this is the Ariel School. So this is the Ariel School one. The one on the bottom is Yossi Ronan, an experiencer out of Israel. His gray, and you see people are talking grays, these beings, and you start looking at them and they're all different. The one and on the middle bottom there again looks different. That's the one that was supposedly from the UFO Cover Up Live documentary in 1988, the one that they supposedly had at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Here's one that Tim Taylor, the famous NASA guy that I had a meeting with, he introduced me to one experiencer. I was allowed to talk to her on his cell phone. This is one that she said of all the beings she saw, this is the closest to what she saw. And I've been in contact with her since 2013 when we had this meeting with Tim Taylor. Here's the one with Ron Johnson, who I'm now going to have a meeting with, or an interview that'll be on my White House UFO YouTube channel shortly. He's had experiences his entire life. And of course, his guy is called LB. LB actually took him to the spirit world to meet with his mother. And here again, you can see there are no muscles, no tendons. And Ron is just, he said it looked like a skeleton, and he couldn't believe. And so this is his being. And now he's going to talk about, he's got a very bad heart condition, and he had 2 near-death experiences. He's in hospice care, and he's going to give me an interview about his near-death experiences. This one here is from Sims, who and his name was Tejabar, And he said, when asked, was he an alien? He said, no, he had been here 4,000 years ago. So he actually said he wasn't even an alien. And as I get through, when people confront them, a lot of them, I've never seen one that didn't, but they will all admit, no, we're not aliens. This is the beings. I remember these are the beings from Great Britain, and they're called Chon, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. They don't want to be known as anything. They don't want, and so I asked them the question, are you extraterrestrials? And their answer was, would you like us to be extraterrestrials? We could do that if you want. We could actually take you to our planet. But no, we're not extraterrestrials. We've always been here. You're the visitor. And the part about we've always been here, you start to hear this more and more all the time, that they're here, they've always been here, and we just can't see them. They can pop in, they can pop out. And this comes to the idea that there may be no time, no space. It may be all here now. All our lives are happening at the same time. And this idea of time and space is something that's really throwing us off. Forgotten Promise. This is Sherry Wilde, who was one of the people that she had her book that her kids tried to get an injunction to stop her from publishing this book about the Forgotten Promise, that she had made this promise to come into the world and have this experience with her being, which is, his name is Da. She went to the publisher, finally forced the book into the publisher, and the publisher said, Betty, you said he's a gray. Yeah, she said he's a Zeta. Yeah, he's a gray. And he said, well, he said he's from Andromeda. So what's going on? He can't be from Andromeda. If he's gray, he's got to be from Zeta Reticuli. And she said, really? She had no idea. She goes, I'm going to ask him. So next time he comes, she just, okay, so what's the deal? Are you actually an alien? Like, what's going on here? And then Da said, no, that would not best describe who I actually am. I'm an etheric being on a mission in the cosmos for the creator. I don't know if you've heard the story with Michael Cullen. He has this experience, I think 2014, somewhere in there. He's sleeping on the side of the interstate going through Utah, and he wakes up, he sees this UFO over the top of the hill, and then falls back asleep again. And then suddenly he's out of his body, and he's floating above this UFO, and he pops in there. And he's going down the hall with these two grays, one on one side, one on the other side. And there's this sort of a closet with these gray suits hanging there. And he walks by, and suddenly he's a gray. And he's looking at himself, and he's going, "Oh my goodness, I'm a gray." And he's looking at he's 6 feet tall, and he's looking at these beings. He's the same size as his beings, and he's looking at his hands. And this again indicates that the idea of who these beings are and what they can do is a little bit different than just simply they're extraterrestrials who have gotten lost in space and ended up on Earth. This is Yossi Ronan, and the message that he got sort of sums it up from his beings. And this is a best-selling book. We helped him publish this thing, and this is a really book. And the message is one. That's the main message that everybody has. Everything is one thing. It's all connected. It's all alive, and it's all conscious. This is what he was told. The way you see us is defined by you. When we visit your world, we temporarily have a physical body, defined in a certain way, but it is not the only form or our original essence. In our dimension, there is no need for a physical body described in a particular way as in yours. You share the definitions of reality that are given to you, but you are not yet aware of it. And this is this whole idea that we are all etheric beings. They're playing in their little stage role. They're on the stage saying their lines, and they're playing aliens. We're on stage, we're saying our lines, and we're playing humans. We're going to leave stage right, and we're going to go and back into an etheric being. We're going to go into another being for another experience. We're all etheric beings. We're all one. We're all connected, and we're all conscious. It's almost like one of the analogies is that we are like the wave of an ocean. We are an individual wave, but we're also part of the ocean. And we have to realize this, that we see everything as nouns. What science has done, it's changed everything from a noun, from a verb to a noun. Everything is a verb. Everything is changing. 1 million cells die in your body every second. They're reproduced by other cells. Everything's moving. And if you take away time, you will see it's a verb, because everything is changing. Everything is even mountains are getting more rounded and stuff like this, and trees are growing on the mountain and stuff and you realize it's all one thing. And what time does is it stops things. As we see things in the here and now, and time allows science to make everything nouns. It's just a cloud, it's just a wave, it's just a person, it's just an energy form, it's just placebo, it's just super super psi. It's just accident. It's just random. It's just this and that is nature. It's evolution. And they're putting names and nouns on everything. And what you do is you make everything where it's not alive, it's not conscious, and it's not connected to anything. It is a verb. Everything is a verb. And we're seeing it mistakenly as nouns because of time and space. Here's some developments. I'm working on about 5 different books, and here's some of the developments that I'm working on. The consciousness download started with me in 2012. It's still getting wider and wider. When I first had to download, it was just consciousness. I just knew it was something to do with ESP, and it came with absolute certainty, and I knew this is how it worked. But the idea of mental, the mental to consciousness thing has been around for a long time. This is from the top secret memo that was written by the Canadian government in 1950. Wilbur Smith went down to the United States to see what was going on. He talked to the Research and Development Board, which is the weapons people in Washington at that time, and he was told all this stuff. And number 5 is the most important thing. He said, we're also told other things might be associated with the saucers, such as mental phenomena. The Americans aren't doing very well because they've said if we're working on the problem, they're willing to exchange credentials and talk to us. So the whole thing was mental phenomena was known in 1950. They knew that mental phenomena. And the question was, how did you know that? Because the first encounter was not until Adamski, 10 days after the detonation of the hydrogen bomb, that came forward and said he was talking to aliens. Before that, really nobody was talking to aliens. So how did they know? And the way they probably knew was because they had a live alien at Roswell, and the thing was talking in their heads, and they realized, like, oh my God, so there's this consciousness effect. And now it's elaborated, and I think the crafts are getting more complex. They're actually putting in more and more complex crafts, and I'll talk about one in a minute, where you look at it, and it's almost like James Lukatsky, who talked about publicly that he was allowed to talk about it, about getting inside a craft. And he was asked what was inside the craft. And he basically said, if you knew the answer to that, you'd know the whole rest of the book that I wrote was totally primitive. And he said, I can't talk about it right now. I'm going to try to get a clearance as to what was inside the craft. But here's a guy that ran the OSAP program, and it is being cleared to say certain things. The telepathy tapes is the other thing that's happening. So you have this movement in stuff being dropped, I believe, by people in the government. And then you have this unbelievable story of the telepathy tapes. I think I was the first, or one of the first people to interview Kai Dickens. If you have not watched the telepathy tapes, you've got to go to Telepathy Tapes podcast. On Christmas Day, the podcast had 1.5 million listeners. So you say, well, we're not getting anywhere. We need disclosure. We need all this sort of stuff. The telepathy tapes, when you get 1.5 and you're the biggest podcast in the world, we're making ground. This is absolutely revolutionary. It's the most important thing I've seen in 50 years. And that is these nonverbal autistic people who are 100% telepathically have ability. 100. If you take a look at remote viewing, according to the stats, the really high-end remote viewing that just blows you away is only 5 to 10%. These kids are 100%. They are never wrong. And they are talking other languages that they've never spoken. And they're talking to dead people, and they're talking to God, and they're on a hill, all telepathically talking to each other. This is the most important thing that changes everything. And it's almost like they're landing the plane. They've allowed this to sort of slip out at this point, and all these things are coming together at the same time. This whole telepathy tapes has to do with, I wrote a book called Contact Modalities. I talk an awful lot about it, about the right brain, left brain. The left brain is the male brain. The right brain is the female brain. And the whole thing about paranormal phenomena, about getting into the field and pulling material out of the field, or telepathy, is the ability to shut the left brain, shut the male brain down that wants to have urinating contests and fight and be, egotistical and stuff like that. And the reason these kids are so highly telepathic is because they can't speak. The verbal center is in the left side of the brain. So they have left brain damage. And that's why they're so telepathic, is they can shut it down. And we can do it, as I put in the contact modalities. You can shut the left brain down using hypnosis. So what do you do in hypnosis? You say to the person, okay, just count your breath. Okay, count your breath. And the ego says, oh yeah, I'm good. I am the best breath counter that ever lived. I can do that. And then about 10 seconds later, it sort of wanders off. Oh, I'm getting tired of doing this. I'm going to do something else. No, go back to the breath. Count your breath. And what the thing does is it makes the left brain shut down, because it's sitting there and it's going, oh, I hate this. And it just shuts down. And then, boop, you're in the field. Meditation is the same thing. It's shutting the left brain down. Psychedelics is shutting the ego. It collapses the ego. The ego's on the left side. Brain injuries, brain damage, such as non-speakers, will exhibit the abilities, or people who've had UFO experiences will suddenly become psychic. And I have this at the bottom here. Entities. I always see the weird parts of stories that I also wonder, like, why does an alien wake people up? Like they wake them up before they abduct them. Like, what do you do that for? And what you're doing is the same thing. You're shutting the left brain down. You're getting the person to surrender. You're getting the person to dissociate, because the guy wakes up and goes, oh my God, I'm going to die. There's an evil alien standing beside my bed. And he just disassociates. And then they go, okay, Zogar, he's ready to go. And off they go, and they put him through the wall and do whatever they're going to do. Extreme dancing, pain, near-death experiences. And Conan's is one that I took me a while to understand. But the idea of a Conan, it's this whole thing, problems that can't be solved. Like what's the sound of one hand clapping? And you say, well, that's a stupid question. And the left brain goes, yeah, what is the eye? What is the sound of one hand clapping? And then the left brain sits there and tries to figure it out. There must be a logical answer to that. And it just goes off, and you move it away, and then you're able to access the right brain, which is the female brain, which believes in oneness and let's all be a family. Let's do things together. Let's not fight and stuff like that. And that's this right brain, left brain thing, which is critically important, which has been sort of ignored. The UFO phenomena. This is a book that I've written that's actually sort of taking off now. This is the book on the UFO sky pilots, and this goes at 36 witnesses who claim that they have flown the craft. The first one that I talked to, I thought she was absolutely insane. I'd never heard it. It was 39 years I'd been doing the phenomena. I'd never heard it in my life. I thought she was insane. And then all these people started coming to me almost synchronistically, and friends that I knew, Chris Bledsoe, I'd known him for years, and he said he'd flown the craft. I said, you flew the craft too? And I started encountering all these people, and I learned an awful lot. And this is the idea. You talk to the people who've been on the ship, and you start looking at the similarities of what they're telling you, and a lot of what that is lessons that these people they're not really doing stuff. They're sort of being taken through little scenarios, and they think they're doing one thing, and actually they're being taught to do something and bring a message back. So this is a book that I've written, and I'm actually going to do one on Whitley Strieber, where we're going to bring 3 people on who have actually flown the craft, and we're going to highlight these people. We've actually had confirmations of this now, of this whole idea that the mind is part of how you move the craft around. James Lukatsky said, he's the guy that ran the OSAP, the big $22 million program for Bigelow. He said, we have discovered that the craft is a combination of physical and psychic material. And that's what the cover-up, I think, is about. It's about the second element that they haven't got a clue. They're looking for technology, and as one experiencer was told, do not go down the technology road. It's a trap. Jim Semivan has confirmed that there's a consciousness connection to this thing. Jake Barber, the latest whistleblower, has come out and said, yes, they have these people who they call it psionics, which is basically CE5. They just give it it's almost like changing the word UFO to UAP. They want we want to sound cool. So we'll call it psionics. And then you saw the video that they had, these 2 little lights in the sky, their demonstration at the Esalen Institute, these 2 little lights in the sky. And the first thing I thought was, oh my God, Stephen Greer can do better than that. I mean, that's crazy. I was at a Skywatch with, in Arizona, we saw 49 objects with Gen 3 glasses in an hour and a half, and they had two objects, and Gary Nolan, who was there, didn't see anything. Bob Bigelow trying to get a craft, which I'll talk about in a second. Bob Bigelow talked about this, and he said a lot of the contractors have crafts, but they really aren't getting anywhere. And I think it has to do with consciousness. It has to do with consciousness. That's what it's about. I'm going to talk. I just did an interview yesterday with Jack Sarfati, which we're going to play. And we talk about a craft that he encountered, a friend of his encountered, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Eric Davis has confirmed there's a consciousness connection I'll put off. And James Ryder, extremely important. James Ryder, I believe, was the guy, a senior vice president at Lockheed, who actually offered a craft to Bigelow Aerospace. And he was a guy that I believe was in the skiff with Tom DeLonge. Tom DeLonge talks about being in the Lockheed skiff in 2015. And he said, one of the guys said, all I want to know is how did they get here? How does the propulsion system work? And he said, because he was hanging around with Greer, he said, and it has to do with consciousness. And he said, then the guy said, he says, now you're talking. And he said, also, the guy couldn't shut the guy up. He said, for 45 minutes, all the guy wanted to talk about was consciousness. This guy's in a Lockheed skiff. And I believe it was James Ryder, and he was giving it to Bigelow because they couldn't. He said, we can't figure it out. We've had it, and it's costing us a lot of money to store. People forget that it costs 10 times the amount for security as for the program. So they're wasting money hiding this craft that they can't do anything with. And according to Eric Davis, hinted that they're supposed to give it back in 1989, and they didn't give it back. So James Ryder offered it to Bob Bigelow, and because it had this consciousness effect, they couldn't get it to work. And so he said, you can get it if the Air Force agrees and if the CIA agrees. And of course, the CIA blocked it. And the Air Force said there was a 1953 memo or something that says not only you're not going to give it to somebody, but you got to keep it indefinitely. And this is the whole deal. So they got this craft and they can't do anything with it. And they're paying all this money for security. Now, here's the developments. Here's the interview we did with Jack Sarfati. And Jack Sarfati had a Navy guy, and we questioned him 3 times about this. He had a Navy guy, this we believe was from Lockheed, and he said that the guy said that the craft is conscious. So this is what the 36 witnesses told me. The craft is alive, it's conscious. He added 2 things that I had never heard before. It has its own will, that the craft has its own will. This is a guy that ran the program for this craft for 4 years. And not only that you cannot get in the craft until the craft lets you get in. So unless you've got the right mindset, you don't get in the craft. And that suddenly it occurred to me what James Lukatsky had said during an interview with Knapp and with Corbell. He said he talked about this thing. People say the government they're being lied to. So he talks about a meeting in a congressional facility. So if they're being lied to, why is he having a meeting? Why is the head of OSAP having a meeting in a congressional facility? That's Congress. That's the House and Senate. And he said there was a senator in the meeting, and it was a long meeting in this facility. And I now identified the senator as being Senator Reid, who was one of the gang of 8, who supposedly is being told the brief story that we got this stuff, and they have this very high security clearance. And so this guy stated that they couldn't get inside the craft. And so when Lukatsky was talking, he said part of the meeting was about the fact that we've got this craft and we've managed to get inside it. And then it made sense why he said that we managed to get inside it, that they had this craft for decades and they couldn't get inside the craft because the craft only allows you in if it wants you to let you in. It's a complete conscious craft with its own will, and it's controlling the disclosure. It's not a thing that crashes and you just get a diamond drill and you drill in there and the hit the right button and the thing pops open. This is a conscious thing that lets people in, and this is where you see the crafts have become much more complex than the original crafts, say from 1896. Now you get these crafts, almost like they're bringing in new crafts and giving us new ideas and just making more and more complex as they gradually, the phenomena tells us what's going on. And the important thing again here is consciousness. It's the fact that these things are consciousness. So when I had these people, the bottom line was that people would find themselves on a craft. And I had a retired U.S. Air Force colonel that flown combat in Iraq. I had a 747 United Airlines pilot. I had a couple other pilots and stuff. And they basically all tell the same story. You're on the craft and you're told to touch something, or you're asked, where do you want to go? So Ron Johnson told the story. He said, I was sitting there and I was sitting in this chair that was like it was built for me. And they said, Ron, where would you like to go? And he said, I'd like to see the Milky Way from a distance. They said, okay, Ron. And here's the important part. They said, Ron, it is within you. Go within yourself, and when you can imagine it, then we'll go there. And a number of witnesses were told this. It's within you. It's the same thing as remote viewing. You're not going anywhere. You're going to go look at Jupiter or whatever. You're not saying, hang on, I'll fly in there. I'll be there in a minute. It's like you give the guy the number 453709, and the remote viewer says, I'm at the target. You're instantly at the target. And the whole thing is almost this Sufi expression that Gaur always uses. The Sufi expression, you see yourself as a puny form when within you is enfolded the entire universe. And that's what we may be coming down to, that this is all within us, that out-of-body experiences, you got to go within to go without, and it's all within us. And that's where these kids are pulling this stuff, that they're pulling it out of this field, and it's all within us. And so you have the people on the craft, and then they're told to touch something. So Ron was touching the end of the arms of this chair, and he said there was they said it would be a very intense G-force. He was the only guy that talked about the G-force, but it was intense G-force for 1 second. He said the front window opened, and there in the distance was the Milky Way, which would have been, estimate 60, 70,000 light years. He moved in 1 second. If that story is true, unless they are faking this thing and making them imagine this happened, there's something wrong with our idea of time and space. Because the other one that talked about going within,
actually went from the other side of the galaxy to point, and it was instantaneous, they said. And a lot of them will say it's instantaneous, and that you touch the craft is alive, you become one with the craft. And whatever you think is what the craft does. You can think instantaneously. And that's why the military is so heavy trying to get this material, because it's this whole idea of controlling a craft with your mind. And if you go back, there's a 2004 experiment. If you Google search rat brain and F-22, you will see an experiment that was done at University of Southern Florida before this thing went black. And they have 20,000 neurons of a rat brain, and they teach it to fly an F-22 simulator. That's where we're going. If you're going to have AI, it's got to have biological components to it. If you have just a classical computer, it's just a switch, off, on, off, on. It doesn't even know it's a switch. It has no clue. But if it's like a body with every cell in the body can create another body, and it can reproduce everything. It knows what the rest of the body is doing. And that's what this is. It's this biological thing that has intelligence, and it can store unlimited intelligence and tap into the field and create things. So this biological craft shows what AI is going to look like in the future. It's going to be this biological thing that has its own will and its own thoughts. Now we get to this thing where I sort of challenge people. See how much time I got here. 39. Okay. Challenge people to this idea that we should get the disclosure right now. Now, we did the book UFOs Area 51 and Government Informants, where we went after Dr. Eric Walker, who's the highest level official anybody's ever talked to. He had 14 honorary doctorate degrees. He was president of Penn State University for 15 years. He was the chairman of the board of the top military think tank in the country, where DARPA came from, where the Jasons came from. He helped develop that. He helped Vannevar Bush create in the late 1940s security policy for the U.S. military. And what he said to us, he said, you jump to hasty conclusions. Maybe so. He's talking about a crash, which I now believe is the 1952 Arizona crash, which they supposedly got up and walked away. They landed the craft and they walked away. And when he said, first though, he told us, he said, how do you know they didn't walk away? And I thought, yeah, come on, what, do you think we're stupid? They were not going to walk away. And then that's what he says. Maybe some walked away, maybe they didn't, because we were asking about Roswell. And he said, you're running to hasty conclusions. Maybe some walked away, maybe some did not walk away. As I say, it's none of your business. Just to satisfy your curiosity is not going to do any damn good except to make you happy. Is that not true? Are we to change all the plans and regulations? And it was when I heard that in 1990, I said, oh shit, there's plans. They actually have plans and regulations. And this is the deal where it is that they actually have, but there's so much security, there's so much fear and so many levels of security. You can't get to the bottom of the whole thing, but there are plans and regulations that was drawn up just to make you happy. If you say that you're looking for the truth, you will never get it anyway, so forget it. Often he told us this thing, unless you have the mind of Einstein, you will never get anywhere. And that's what I'm seeing. This thing is getting more complex and more complex. And it's not a simple thing like we've got this puzzle and we got this one little piece. They give us this one little piece and we're going to be all flying around in, little spaceships. If that were true, we would not have lost the Afghan war to a bunch of guys driving around on camels and donkeys. I do not believe we have the technology. It is a little bit, we may have some metal technology we've developed from it, but the whole concept of consciousness is the concept that has to be developed. This is where Lukatsky talks about this book, where he talks about the fact that they had this meeting and Reed was in the room, which means that at least Reed, one of the senators, was briefed. He knew. And that's where Reed got very upset when people said that he said there was crash material and he wanted people to reverse it. And he wanted people to reverse those statements because he had been caught violating security oaths and talking about something he shouldn't have been talking about, the fact that we had recovery material. Jim Semivan talks about another aspect that I found very interesting. At one point, he's talking about his encounter. He's a SES-2, which is equivalent to a 2-star general in the CIA, retired in 2008, but had an experience, and in his room with beings. And he, at one point, says, you see the spiritual implications to this thing. He said, I was standing there, I was asked, was there telepathy involved? And he said, yeah, it's the most interesting part. I was standing there and there was a being behind me. I don't know what it was, but he said it had this guardian type thing going on about it. And I went, guardian type thing. And we asked the interviewer, I said, ask him, is it on the right side or left side? Because if you've studied Michael Newton and Journey of Souls, where we go, reincarnate. And he took 7,000 people, let them die in their last lifetime, and took them into the spirit world. And they all said the same thing. And they all talk about when you die, you go in front of a council between 3 and 12 people, and they ask you, how did it work out? And you can't bring up Hillary Clinton. You can't bring up your mother-in-law. Dog ate the homework. You planned the whole thing. We planned to do this thing. You're going to be an alien. I'm going to be a human. We come in and we play our little roles. And everybody says the same thing when they come out, is the fact that I could have done better. That's what they say. I could have done better. I was going to do this and I got scared. But the guardian angel stands behind you on the left side. And so I'm thinking to myself, oh, there's a lot of people that said that. So I actually went to Whitley Strieber. I said, Whitley, you're on the craft, aren't you? He said, yeah. I said, hey, a lot of these people are talking about there's somebody behind them, and the person behind them is telling them what to do. This Air Force retired colonel. And he said he didn't know it was humans or aliens or who it was, but somebody behind him was telling them what to do. And I said, did you ever have that experience? He said, all the time. He said, I told you I was going to steal it. I was thinking of stealing the craft. I was sitting there at the panel board and I was going to steal the craft. And somebody behind me, he thought to himself, I think I'm going to steal this thing. And somebody behind him started laughing telepathically. And he said he believed there was always somebody behind him. And this is his whole idea, that there may be a staged thing where your guardian angel is there and this is all a big play and you're learning something or whatever. And it's not what we think it is. Lukowski is an important guy to listen to because he's a guy that is trying to get this material out. And when he describes this fact that if you knew what was inside the craft, you'd know that everything else is primitive. And you hear these stories of the fact that Chris Bledsoe talked about it, Lovelace talked about it, this idea that the craft is 30 feet across and you go inside and it's the size of a football stadium inside. And Jacques Vallée had these type of cases. Hal Puthoff talked about these kind of cases. And I remember the woman that first told me this in Phoenix, Arizona. And she dropped this thing about she was flying the craft. And I thought, come on, you're crazy. Yeah, come on. I was thinking women in Saudi Arabia can't even drive a car without a man. And they let you fly the flying saucer with no license. I mean, come on, you're 70 years old or 75, whatever she was. Letting you fly a craft. Should you have flown 3 different models? And she dropped that on me. And then the next thing bomb she dropped on me, she says, you can, the craft, they make the craft as big as they want. And then she said, and this is 2013 already. So you can see how nobody had ever talked about it. And suddenly this stuff's almost like it's coming into the zeitgeist. This stuff starts coming in and people start remembering and they start telling this stuff. So she said, they've got crafts that are as big as solar systems. I said, what? You kidding? She said, yeah, they can make the craft as big as they want. Now we've got stories of, for example, Susie Hansen, who's the top researcher in New Zealand, has written 2 books on the grays and the technology she's been taught. And she said that they told her on the ship, they said, watch, we're going to make the craft bigger. And she said she watched and the walls started to move out. And she said, went so far she couldn't see the walls anymore. And this is the whole idea. It's this consciousness thing. Everything is made out of consciousness. We believe this thing, it's nouns, it's physical. And if you break it back, it's not. It's energy, it's consciousness. And the bottom line is that the original source, whatever it is, God, whatever we want to call it, creates the waves. And the waves are the sparks of the divine. And we're creating the heavens and the earth. God does not create anything. He gives us free will and he gives us the ability to create stuff. And what we're doing is we're putting stuff in. We're inputting stuff, making the world more elaborate, more magnificent. The universe is getting bigger. And that's what it is. That's what we're doing. We're doing this process of this creation of the universe. And we've done this. And it's all made out of mind forms. The idea of the physical universe is a perception. It's like the world is flat. The sun's going around the earth. There's only one galaxy. There's only 5,000 stars. No. Everything you see is going to be wrong. It's this different world. And that's what's so hidden in the world that some of the people know this kind of stuff. But how do you bring this out to people who have now the stat is that in the United States, there's 43% of people in the United States who are reading at a grade 5 level. I mean, how do you bring out this kind of stuff to people who are just trying to make a living and just trying to pay the bills and take the kid to soccer practice? And this is the other big question. So he said curiosity. And that's why I said to people, because people want this out, but all it is curiosity. Walker is absolutely right. He says, you're just curious. Admit it. You're just curious. And I'll say to people, why do you want it out? And I go, I don't know. I just want to know. And it's like, yeah, that's just curiosity. So if you're running this thing and you've got this thing and you're looking at weapons and you got evil Russians and Canadians and Greenlanders and China and weapons we don't want everybody else to develop. We want these weapons to develop. And so you get in this situation where they have a reason why they want it. They're working on it, why they're not covering it up, but we really don't have a good reason why we want it disclosed. We just say we want it disclosed. Are we paying taxes? Well, if you're paying taxes, according to Semivan, this thing is a PED. It's a presidential executive emergency action document, which means it's being run by the White House. It's not being, and it's exempt from disclosure to Congress. It's a thing like the presidential security. So I'm paying taxes. I want to know when the president's coming to my city and what streets he's going to drive down. They're going to go, get lost. We're not going to tell you. I want to know what happens if there's a nuclear war. What are the plans for the nuclear war? Where are they going to move the president? They're not going to tell you that kind of stuff. That's a PED. That's an emergency thing. And the same thing happened with UFOs, because we know, because the head of emergency management in Canada was brought to the United States and was briefed. And he, on his deathbed, he told Paul Hellyer, I just want to tell you something. This is things for real. I went and signed my life away at Langley, and they told me that's what you need. So you're a very fearful society. All the world's a fearful society. We build up fear. So what you need is an emergency action plan. And so what happens if this happens? What happens if this happens? And all these contingency plans you're working on, because you're living in this world of fear. So the curiosity thing is really not a sufficient need. That's what we're trying to push, or because we pay taxes or whatever. And that's what Walker said. Why should we change the rules and regulations to satisfy your curiosity? We don't care if you're curious. We don't. And so it comes to the bottom level. Is the book I'm going to write is no government UFO disclosure, because that's all weapons, but real disclosures. The second part is to get real disclosure, to talk to the experiencers as to what's really going on. What are the beings saying? What are they telling us? What's really going on? What is the nature of reality? Forget about the weapons, forget about the enemies, all that crap. Let's go to the experiencers. And they're always left out. If you see Seoul, the Seoul conference has actually said, we are not going to allow the woo factor in there. And so you cut the experiencers out. If you look at all the major documentaries, you'll see no experiencers. Everybody wants to be cool. Everybody wants to talk about nuts and bolts and hardware and crash flying saucers. Because once you go, you even know that if you go to the Consciousness Life Expo, you get the people who are doing the crash stuff, and the room is jammed with 600 people. And then you go into a consciousness section, there's like 35 people there. People just haven't caught on yet. They haven't realized this thing has to do with the nature of reality. That's what they're telling us. That's what they're telling us. That's why you do weird stuff, like the article I wrote for Alan's book. It's called The Theory of Wow. Now I call it the Jesus Circus. You would not know who Jesus was. You would not know his message unless he'd walked on water, which is what the aliens do. They hover. They walk across the ground without touching the ground. They go, holy cow. And they fed 5,000 people. There's incidents, UFO incidents, where they've done that kind of thing, where they've made huge amounts of stuff appear where there was nothing there. And raised, cured people. 50% of all UFO experiencers say they can cure people, or they've been cured. So it's the same thing. And you would never know who Jesus was if he hadn't done the miracles. That's what they're doing. They're doing these miracles. They're telling you with the paranormal weird stuff. They're telling you that's not how it works. You think, oh, the world is flat. It's this, and that, and this is going on. And they go, no, that's not how it works. And what they're doing is they're creating awe and curiosity, because unless you have awe and curiosity, which everybody watching this has awe and curiosity, we're all down the rabbit hole. They want you to have awe and curiosity because you're going to do research. If you've got it all figured out, you're not going to do any scientific research. It's like Gary Nolan says, I'm not interested in the 95% that fall inside the bell curve. I'm interested in the dots that fall outside the bell curve. That's where the Nobel Prize is. Why is that thing outside the bell curve? Why are people levitating? Why is all this kind of stuff happening? And it tells you the world is not the way you think it is. And so Walker said, what are you going to do when you figure it out? And in the end, people don't really have an answer to that either. The military people have an answer to that. But for the common people on the street, it's basically just curiosity, or it's this idea that you have a lot of scientists say, we want it put in the white world. So I say it's compartmentalized. We can't figure this thing out. That, I believe, is nonsense, because if you take a look at how Skunk Works actually started, it started when they built the first jet fighter after World War II. The Germans had the jet fighter, and they went to Lockheed, and they formed Skunk Works to build the first jet fighter. They built it in 143 days, and they had the same compartmentalized need to know type stuff. And they built the F-117 in 18 months. The compartmentalization is how it works. They can build crafts. It's like if that was true, that everything doesn't work because it's compartmentalized, they wouldn't invent anything. They've got all sorts of stuff coming out. They know how it works. It's their rules. But when it comes to us, we really don't have a really good reason, except a lot of these people say we want it in the white world, because everybody knows. Tim Taylor, the story of Tim Taylor with the one invention, that company was, and I don't know what else was in the company, it was sold on NASDAQ for $100 million. Everybody knows there's a lot of money. So if you're a scientist, you want it in the white world, because I want to make some money too. I want to see the craft. So if they're going to put the crafts into the public, what are you going to do? If the crafts are in the black world, because they go with sole source contract, as they do with any. If you want that stuff to discovered, you're not going to put a contract, say, we got a UFO from Roswell here, and we want people to analyze this thing, and everybody can come and take a look at it and see the specs and see what we want to come out of this thing. The Russians will be there looking at it. No, you're not going to do that. You got to do it secretly. So you go with sole source contract, as they did with Bigelow. Bigelow can do this. We give him the contract, and then you seal the whole thing down with security. And this is where we're sort of missing the boat, that we think that's illegal, that's bad what they're doing. They were hired to do that. And now you're saying, oh, we hired you to do that. Now we want you to give the craft back. And they go, to hell with you. Even Bigelow said that. Forget it. We're not going to do it. And Brandon Fugel said, forget it. It's this thing is, we put all our money in it. Now you want it back. I mean, what kind of deal is that? There was a deal that said, we will never identify who you are. You will never say you work for the CIA. And that's how these contracts, and they're run all the time. That's how the government works. It does these sole source contracts in order to keep it secret. You can't put it into the newspaper. And so now you have these guys with this material. And the question is, if you get back like this eminent domain, if you get it back, what are you going to do? I mean, you have this Schratt guy who's always talking about, just give the stuff out. What's he going to do? He's a horse farm. You're going to get a wagon and a bunch of horses, go to Lockheed and put a saucer on his back, and take it to his garage and start working on it. What are you going to do with the saucer? You're going to give it to a contractor, because you have to give it to a contractor. You got to give it to somebody who's going to expert at it. And the experts have it now. So you're going to take it from them, and then who are you going to give it to? You got to give it to somebody. And people say, well, give it to Elon Musk. So then you give it to your friends, give it to your relatives and stuff like that. This is the difficult problems you have in what's going on, is that these laws were built on how the security is done, how stuff is built. And now you got to get out of this problem of, you gave it to Lockheed, and this company went broke because you didn't give anything to them. And Lockheed made a lot of money from this. And all these lawsuits that Michael talked about are going to be all over the place when you get it. And that's what's stopping them from putting it out. They don't want the lawsuits. So that's about it. We're in the Western world, and we are in a situation where we've built this thing, but I think we're at a crossroads where consciousness has really gained. When I first started, nobody's talking about consciousness. Now everybody's talking about consciousness. And even though they don't know what they're talking about, and they know it's a buzzword, and it's happening in science as well, where you can talk about consciousness, you can talk about UFOs. We've gotten to this point where the discussion is going to take place, and it's going to come from the bottom up. And that's the way the phenomena has done it, except for a couple of instances. The incident at CIA in 1959, where they had a contact event, and right at Holloman Air Force Base, where they had a contact, which actually was actually given to Steven Spielberg, which became Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That event actually happened, the Close Encounters of the Third Kind event that Spielberg wrote up. So we have those events, but we have, more and more we're realizing that the experiencers have a lot of material. And that's why when Chris Bledsoe had this very high level of contact, all these military and industrial people came to him, and they went to him and they said, he said, what are you doing? My kids they're being harassed in school. I need you guys to leave. You're destroying my family. You're all over the place. Why are you here? And they said, well, Chris, it appears they like you, Chris, and they're talking to you, Chris. They don't like us. They're not talking to us. So we're here to find out what you're doing. And that's the whole thing. You go to the experiencers. As when I talked to Tim Taylor, he said, well, you want these two women. He said, one used to live near you. And I said, yeah, really? He said, we'd like to talk to her. I said, yeah, sure. And she had this really bizarre story and he was keeping track of her. He was keeping track. She was writing down all her encounters, all her premonitions and stuff. And Tim I don't know how many experiences he was dealing with, but he was following these people. That's what you got to do. You got to, like when he went to the Tim Taylor went to the Rome, to the Vatican, the library. I was told that he was looking for levitating monks. And that's the thing. There's going to be technology. You're looking at the monk. How did he levitate? There's a glow on his face. They all have the glow on their face. And he's trying to figure this thing with technology. And that's where we got to go. But we got to go to the experiencers. We're still in this idea of waiting for a handout from the government. And the way I see it, there's no chance the government is going to drop this thing anytime soon. They're digging in, and you're going to get a lot of these stuff. Even the witnesses that come forward, I'm still very, very skeptical, because when these witnesses come forward, first thing I always think, like I said to Sarfati about this Navy guy telling them about the craft and it's alive and all this kind of stuff. I said, well, why would he tell you this? Why isn't he in jail? Like, how's the security thing work? If the Congress can't find out, why are these guys coming out? It's sort of like, I'm going to tell you what the launch codes for the missiles, and I want to be a whistleblower, and I want protection. It's like, no, it's like all these security laws are built for a reason. And these guys coming out, and I always think they may not know that they're working, the government has given it, but the government has given them authorization to talk. And they're gradually leaking the story out. And that's the same thing that the intelligence is doing. It's been doing this right from the word go. And that's what they said. We know how to land a plane. Don't worry. They know exactly what they're doing. And they are coming from the bottom up. They are going to people on the street. And as the people go together and they start talking, almost like the telepathy tape started, where they found one kid who was telepathic, and then found another. Then they found those two kids were talking to each other, and it built to the biggest podcast in the world. And that's what's going to happen. These ideas are going to come from the ground up rather than the government down. So I'll leave it at that.
Amazing. Thanks, Grant. Always amazing. A couple of questions come up. You say go back to the experiencers, but a lot of people say the experiencers only know what the beings want them to know. That's one part of the question. And are we being led like a carrot in front of us, where the horizon's always the same distance away, or are we actually getting closer to the goal line? So those are two basic questions.
Yeah, we are being led. Sure, we're being led by the phenomena, no doubt about it. And yes, they are leading us to. If you look at when 75, when I started, I didn't know any of this stuff. There was no idea of consciousness or live crafts or telepathy or anything. It was just straight. It was like UFOs, and the odd time they land and they burn circles. Well, for example, the burning of circles, the ground traces, 4,000 of them, that stopped in 2000. Even before 2000, it hasn't been running for 25 years. And then you start to realize like that they're gradually moving us down the road, but they're doing it through this paranormal thing. They're doing it through this thing where it makes you curious, and you can't let it go. And then you get to a situation where the government is slowly leaking stuff to climatize people, which was put out in the Rand report in the 1960s, where people say, "Oh, we don't want catastrophic disclosure." I said, "What could possibly be catastrophic disclosure? Come on, what happened in 2017?" I remember I wrote an article called "The 64 Reasons They Decided Not to Tell You the Truth." In 2009, 2017, the New York Times puts it on and says, "Oh yeah, there are UFOs, and the government is studying them." And everybody goes, and the idea was the stock market is going to melt down, people are going to commit suicide, and what happened? Absolutely nothing. Doing, yeah, we knew that already. Come on, it's stupid. We knew that. And that's going to be the same thing. You say, what's catastrophic disclosure? Oh, they're going to say they got crafts and bodies. I'll guarantee you, if they make an announcement on Fox or CNN or something that they've got crash material, people are going to go, yeah, we knew that already. They've acclimatized people. They're moving people down the road. And now they're starting to leak this consciousness stuff into the field. Even Lukatsky said the next book, he's going to talk about what's inside the craft. And that's his weird thing where he said there was no engine and there was no fuel tank. And yet the craft was alive. And I went to Chris Bledsoe and I said to Chris, they're flying around that orb for 3 days. He said it was 3 months. It appeared to be 3 days, but it was 3 hours, and it was 3 months. And he said, Grant, I've never seen an engine ever. And then you start hearing these people don't see an engine.
Grant, no. Well, no, when you first started writing about the sky pilots, I thought, well, Grant really lost it here. And then, Jacob Barber says, yeah, we're flying the plane. So you're absolutely right, about.
Yeah, you're getting these confirmations from high-level government officials that this consciousness thing is a factor. And Bob Bigelow said the reason they're not getting anywhere, he said, I think it has to do with consciousness. And he has a consciousness institute. And the guy that wrote Hunt for Zero Point, his wife had this bizarre experience where she was in this field where she knew the answer to everything, which is the same thing as UFO experiencers. They have answers to everything. 40% of them claiming on the ship at one point they knew the answer to everything, which would indicate that the aliens know the answer to everything. Because they gave it to these people, the access to it. So they're not here to analyze the soil or to figure out how we work, how our ego works. They know the answer. They're doing something else. And even Chris Bledsoe, I asked Chris Bledsoe, I said, hey, Chris, you flew the craft. I said, all these military people, did they ever ask you how you flew the craft? He said, oh, yeah, they brought a 1-star general in. And he asked me, and I showed the 1-star general how to fly the craft. So they're watching, and this consciousness thing is starting to come out. And when you get the telepathy tapes doing 1.5 million listeners per cat, podcast, we're making a move. People always want everything yesterday. We got to realize we got in eternity. We live forever, and it doesn't matter. It's what you learn. It's not what cards are played to you. It's what you're learning, and that's what they're doing. They're slowly dripping this stuff out, and it's getting more complex, and the government is doing it as well. There's some sort of disclosure problem thing where they're allowing these guys to talk. Otherwise, all these guys will have to be in jail. First thing I do is lock them up.
Grant, do you feel that the drip disclosure is happening as it should? Because ultimately, at first, I mean, years ago, I would say we should have full disclosure, not drip disclosure. But the way that they've been doing this and climatizing people to this information seems like they first started with basically saying that there's this program out there. And then we have David Grush with the milestone of, well, I'm connected to people that are in these programs. And now we have people that are saying that they're part of these programs. So it seems like it's been a constant, like, okay, this is the next layer of it. So what's your take on the way that the drip disclosure is happening right now? And is it a good thing?
Yeah, I think they're allowing these people to advance ideas, especially the Lakatsky one, where he's asked what's the inside of the craft. He confirms, yes, we got inside this craft, indicating that they couldn't get in for years, and they finally found a way to get in. And this Navy guy claims it was because the craft let him in. And so you get that, and then he says when they ask him what's inside the craft, he said, I have to take it through to DOPSR. I have to get it approved. I'm going to try to get it in the next book. So why are they allowing him to talk about this, or why are they allowing Barber to talk about Psionics? I mean, is that not going to be classified? The fact that they're talking UFOs out of the sky and stuff like that's got to be classified. If that's not classified, what's classified? And that's the idea that they sort of drop it, but you've got no proof. So it's the guy's testimony against, everybody says the guy's crazy. He's got a background of, suicide or whatever, they bring up, and they hammer the witness. Like I talked to Ron Pandolfi all the time. It's the same thing. Everything's plausible deniability. He won't say anything on the record. He won't say anything on camera, but he's dropping all these stories, and it's always plausible deniability. Oh, you made it up. Cameron Stone quotes, this sort of stuff. And that's what they do, is these guys are out on their own, and you get somebody as good as David Grush, and he howls all this stuff, and then he gets caught, or you get in a situation where I sort of laughed at Danny Sheehan. Danny Sheehan, yeah. I've never done a non-disclosure agreement, and then he's telling all these stories. He tells the one story about the guy with the craft where it's bigger on the inside than outside, and then then the next interview I hear, he says, I can't talk about that. And they said to him, you're a lawyer for us, and if you want to stay in the program, you got to keep quiet. So without a non-disclosure agreement, they handcuff Danny Sheehan. So that's what they're doing. They're putting this sort of stuff out, and then they pull it back. And I say there's no way that these guys should be walking around telling these stuff that's got to be classified. I mean, it just amazes me, and yet the phenomena is still controlling it. And even Jim Semivan says that for sure. He was asked who's running the show, like in the government. He said they are. And that seems to be true, that this phenomena is running the show, and it's probably done it 1,000 times. It knows exactly what to do, and it's using this theory of wow, this trying to get people interested, where people are talking about it. The more everybody talks about it, like with this, you get bigger audiences, and the consciousness, even though people don't really believe it, the consciousness rises up. And as Max Planck says, you do not convince your opponent that he's wrong by giving him evidence. You win by your opponent dying, one funeral at a time. The new generation is not offended with the idea. So if you talk about now and you go to kids, you'll say, are there beings from other planets? Well, of course there is. I mean, they'll do the whole thing. The consciousness, even though we don't realize, the consciousness is rising, and it will flip, and it'll be like 2017, where everybody's just going to say, yeah, we knew that already, and it just happens.
Well, actually, so right now I'm living with my sister and brother-in-law here, and they're not in this world, but they every night they're watching something on TV, and there's this dating show. It's one of the most famous dating shows. I think it's Love is Blind or something like that, right? Yeah. And they team up two people together, and they're in different rooms, and they can't see each other, and the whole time they get to know each other, and then they eventually they might marry each other, right? Yeah. So in one of the I'm sitting down there, and all of a sudden, this girl and this guy's trying to get to know each other. And then he's like, what are you into? And she goes, have you heard about the UFO crash retrieval programs? And like, I'm telling you, this is the most mainstream of mainstream dating shows.
Yeah.
And she does this whole thing, to be honest, she kind of acted like a stoner when she was doing it, like she was high or something.
Yeah.
But she was breaking it down, saying, did you hear about it? And then multiple episodes when they were just sitting and talking, she was bringing up this information because she's into it. So I'm just getting into like how it's creeping into every single level,
Yeah,
I remember when the New Jersey thing happened, I got more questions about New Jersey from people who had never talked to me, because I don't talk to people about UFOs because you can see their eyes rolling back. But I got so many questions. I must have got 20 people, and people run into restaurants, and people at the next table are talking about the New Jersey drones. That was the biggest movement of any story I've ever seen, the New Jersey thing, even though nothing was proved. But everybody knows that New Jersey story, that they were flying around New Jersey.
UFO crash retrievals, the ultimate holy grail of UFO research. Now, why am I calling it the ultimate holy grail? Well, it's pretty simple, because it's the crash retrievals that are going to be the vehicle that facilitates disclosure. They have the bodies, the debris, and the craft all wrapped up into one entity. That's why this is so important, because without these crash retrieval legacy witnesses coming forward in open congressional hearings, we're all going to be here another 50 years and we still won't know what's going on. That's why it's the crash retrievals that are absolutely pertinent to this discussion here. Now, a couple of announcements, and hopefully you can see these here. The content of each case highlighted in this presentation has remained intact per the description of the original source. The identity of first-hand sources will be protected per Leonard Stringfield's original agreement with his military contacts. The visual aids used in this presentation are computer-generated forensic composite illustrations and sketches, which originated from specific details provided by Leonard's sources. So this is the resource pool that Leonard used to get his information. So 3-star U.S. Air Force generals, U.S. Air Force fighter pilots, astronauts, commercial pilots, air traffic controllers, neurosurgeons, pathologists, theoretical physicists, and mathematicians, U.S. Army officers, U.S. Navy officers, military police, high-level Pentagon officials, top military brass, scientists and engineers who worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and other government facilities. So this is just a cross-section of the caliber of first-hand military witnesses that Leonard had talked with. A couple of quick quotes. UFO crash retrievals can't be real, because if they were, I would have read about it in the local newspaper. Number 2, there are not now, nor ever have been, any extraterrestrial visitors or equipment on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Now, that's their official press release, July 1980. So what we want to do in this presentation is we're going to take the press release from Air Force stating that there's nothing to any of this, and we're going to go up against Leonard Stringfield's first-hand military witnesses, and we'll see who kind of comes out on top here. Now, this is the man of the hour. I want to introduce everyone to Leonard Stringfield. Over a period of 30 years, he collected dozens and dozens and dozens of these first-hand military witnesses. He's the one who coined the term UFO crash retrieval. So credit goes to Leonard Stringfield here. Now, I want to give you some biographical points here before we get into the material. Leonard was born in 1920. He grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. By the time he graduated from high school in 1939, he'd already memorized the entire dictionary. They gave him a name, and they called him Webster, so that was the nickname they gave him. He joined the military as soon as he heard about the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. During World War II, Leonard served in the intelligence service of the 5th Air Force in the Southwest Pacific Theater. After the war, he was employed by a chemical company in Ohio. He retired after 30 years. Leonard served as director of the world's largest UFO research group in the mid-1950s, Civilian Research Interplanetary Flying Objects. He received 8,000 letters in its first 2 weeks of existence. He worked in cooperation with the Air Force Defense Command of the U.S. Air Force 1953 to 1957, investigating and reporting UFO activity. Served as president of the Cincinnati UFO Society in the late 1950s. Leonard served in public relations for NICAP under Donald Keyhoe from 1957 to 1970, conducted a course study on ufology at Marymount High School in 1969. He wrote 2 books, Inside Saucer Post 3-0 back in 1957, Situation Red, The UFO Siege, 1977. served as board of directors and director of public relations for MUFON, served as Ohio investigator for Ground Saucer Watch. And this point here, this is the one we want to drill down on. His lecture on UFO crash retrievals at the 1978 MUFON Symposium in Dayton, Ohio, caused an international sensation. Now, why did it cause an international sensation? A couple of reasons. Number one, this was the first time that the whole concept of UFO crash retrievals was coming onto the radar screen. It really hadn't been heard of before. Now, Roswell was just coming on to the first book, coming into the public domain very early in the research. The second thing is, why there was some pushback, is that the agreement that Leonard made with his witnesses is that he could preserve an important part of our national history by telling these accounts, but the identities of his witnesses had to be kept under wraps. So there was some pushback at the MUFON Symposium because there was no way to third-party independently verify these military witnesses because Leonard would not release the names, and he kept the names down until his death. He passed away December 18th, 1994. So what was the one event that sparked Leonard's interest in UFOs, which ultimately changed the course of his life? There was one significant event. On August 30th, 1945, Leonard had a Foo Fighter sighting from inside a twin-engine C-47 while traveling from Okinawa to Iwo Jima. And there was a couple of Foo Fighters right outside the window. He got a good look at these. One of the engines started sputtering, and they thought they were going to have to ditch in the ocean. But when the Foo Fighter flew away, engine came back on, they landed safely. And so this is Newcastle Sun, January 3rd, 1945. Foo Fighters are latest. Pilots flying over Germany at night report that strange balls of fire are following them around on their missions. They have christened these strange phenomenon Foo Fighters. This is Cincinnati Enquirer, July 19, 1993. Author continues quest for truth about UFOs. What I've collected has staggering implications for mankind. This would be the biggest thing since Christ, really. That is a bold statement. It's a very bold statement, but it's true. If even one of these is correct and authentic, it is the biggest thing since Christ. I want to mention that there were 22 bank boxes of original correspondence, letters, drawings, sketches, telephone numbers of all of these witnesses that Leonard had dealt with. This is the kind of material that needs to go to open congressional hearings. So I'm going to take you to the 1978 MUFON Symposium here. We'll go inside, and here's Leonard giving his lecture, Retrievals of the Third Kind, which was a bombshell presentation. This stuff hadn't been heard before this time. This is the front cover copy of his symposium proceeding. So Retrievals of the Third Kind, a case study of alleged UFOs and occupants in military custody, presented by Leonard Steinfeld. And this is a very lengthy symposium proceeding. And he goes case after case of these firsthand military witnesses, the kind of witnesses that held the bodies, loaded the craft onto 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy trucks and shipped them to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. X-ray technician reports. That's the caliber of witnesses that Leonard had dealt with. Now, everything that we're going to be talking about today comes from this book, UFO Crash Retrievals, The Complete Investigation Status Reports 1 through 7 by Leonard Stringfield. So if you want to go into the intricate details of this, I'm going to give you the page number, the location, how many bodies were recovered, what the craft looked like. All of that is in this book. And I'll give you the references so you can verify this on your own. Second research portion is this book by Ryan Wood, Magic Eyes Only, Earth's Encounters with Extraterrestrial Technology. This was published about 20 years ago. He updated it. So in Leonard's publication, we have 119 crash retrieval cases. In Ryan Wood's recently updated publication, there's an additional 104 cases. So you can see how the numbers are climbing here. Now, before we get into the material, I want to take the entire audience to Las Vegas for just a minute here. And we're going to go to Caesar's Palace, and we're going to go to the roulette wheel. And this roulette wheel has 119 basic spaces here. Let's just call it 120 spaces. And we're going to put down a bet for each 119 crash retrieval Leonard Stringfield military witnesses. So the odds are 119 to 1 in our favor. We can't lose. We can't lose. We literally almost cannot lose. So what I'm getting toward this is all we need is one of these crash retrievals to be correct and authentic. And the whole concept of UFO crash retrieval non-existence completely falls apart. So again, the all odds are in our favor. We only need one of these to be correct. Now, isn't it interesting? In this country, we have something called the First Amendment. It's our freedom of speech. Isn't it just lovely that we have something like this? So what I'm saying here with this freedom of speech is that when you talk about who owns things and the proprietary information and who is the owner of facilities and assets, when you really think about it, it is the taxpayer that owns these assets. We have every reason and every right to question authority. So I'll give you an example. Over at Edwards Air Force Base, we as taxpayers own the runways, we own the buildings, we own the aircraft, we pay for their salaries, we own all the support equipment. The United States government is nothing more than a temporary custodian of these events, of these assets. We own this stuff. We have every right to question authority, and we should. That's our obligation. That is our privilege. UAP hearings, July 26, 2023. So you've got Ryan Graves, Navy pilot, David Grush, U.S. Air Force Intel, David Fravor, F-A-18 Super Hornet pilot, which you're all familiar with here. Just want to highlight what he stated. Now, this is his quote from David Grush. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval program. Let me go to the newspaper clipping here. So this is Waterloo Region Record, July 27, 2023. Whistleblower says multi-decade program that captures UFOs is being concealed. Now, they're the ones that are saying this here. Let's continue on. I want to give credit to my good sketch artist, Rudy Gardea, for all of the preliminary artwork, refined drawings, all comes from Rudy Gardea. Now, let's get going on our first case here. This is UFO crash retrieval in 1942. This is long before Roswell at an Army base north of Georgia that even Leonard didn't know where it was. This is UFO crash retrievals, page 319. So if anyone wants further details, it's page 319. Now, the craft measured 15 feet in diameter, was 10 feet high. There was hieroglyphic type marking written along the outer circumference of the craft itself and then on the inside wall of the kind of like upper dome area. Now, there were 3 features to this craft. When this thing came down, it hit the side of the building, the Army facility, and it ripped a hull breach on the side of the craft. Now, there was a seating area, there was a control area, and then there was an entryway hatch on the bottom. The only way this works is, given the numbers that were given here, is that there is a primary floor that's cavernous and open. Below that, there's a subdeck with an entryway hatch. That's the only way this can possibly work. Now, there were 4 crew members taken alive. 1 was female, 5 feet tall, 90 pounds, large black eyes, milky white skin, and it had teeth as well. So let's go to the next slide here. This gives you kind of a blow up of what these markings might look like. Now, I believe that there is a transnational team of linguistic experts and engineers that are decoding and trying to decipher what these markings mean. There has to be these 3-ring binders full of all these symbols, cross-referencing. People who are linguistic experts have to be looking into this here. So I want to give your audience a world exclusive. I'm going to take you inside the Army facility, and we're going to go inside the craft. I'm going to give you a tour of the interior of the craft itself. So here we are at the Army facility. Now you can kind of see these marking and hieroglyphic type letterings and markings and symbols. Let's do another slide here. Here is the hull breach on the side of the craft. I'm going to rotate left now, where I'll give you a front view of the stairs and the entryway hatch to inside the craft itself. Okay, so now we're climbing up the stairs. We're now at the top of the stairs. We're looking forward now. You can kind of see this central divider. Off to the left, you've got the seats. Off to the right, you've got the control area. The reference for this case specifically stated that there were hieroglyphic markings on the inside of the craft as well. So here you have the seating area, and we did our best looking at this case multiple times over weeks, planning, engineering, what did the interior look like? This is the best representation that we could come up with based on the witness testimony from the Stringfield file. Let me zoom over to the right. I'm going to take you to the control area, and that's what this looks like. This is the best representation that we can do. Let me do a little bit of a blow up here. You can see the details here. So this is what we're looking at now. This is a final rendering here of the control section. And then I want to take you to the bodies. There were 4 bodies recovered. They were taken alive. They died 2 weeks later, but they were taken alive. And this is kind of a detailed view of what the bodies look like according to the Leonard Stringfield witness here. Final view on this one here. So 4 bodies recovered, taken alive. Next case, Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, 1946. It had not become Wright-Patterson Air Force Base until 1947, when the Air Force was its own entity of the military. The source for this is an avionics mechanic and his son named Tex Martin. UFO crash retrievals, page 242, page 243. So not only do you have a 6-year-old boy that saw this, but his avionics mechanic father saw this as well. So you've got 2 independent sources. Now, what you're looking at here is a period correct photograph taken of hangar complex 4 Bay E. So it has Bay A, B, C, D, and E. And what you're looking at here on the right is Bay E. I believe it took place inside this hangar. Now, there was an adjoining cafeteria to the main hangar, and I'm going to take you to the next slide here. So the young 6-year-old Tex Martin was doing very good at school, and he was invited by his father to join him at Wright Field, which he did. So they're inside the cafeteria now, and there was a janitor that said, you know, this young boy looks very nice. I think I'm going to buy him a soda pop. So he hands him this soda pop, and as soon as he did that, there was a military personnel through this adjoining doorway, walks right through, and this little 6-year-old boy, he kind of peers inside this hangar, and he's kind of looking now inside the hangar. I'm going to go to Rudy's drawing. This gives you kind of a rough idea of what it looked like. So he's looking in the hangar now. And what does he see? He sees 2 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy trucks with unknown tarp debris. He sees military personnel. There were a few Jeeps in there. There was an 18-foot diameter dish-shaped craft sitting on the hangar floor on tripod landing gear legs. There were at least 3 ET bodies deceased laying on the hangar floor on stretchers. And he's looking at all this. His father saw this as well. So here is the first pass drawing that gives you an idea of what this scene looks like. And Tex Martin is looking through that doorway back at us here because we reverse the viewing perspective. So now I want to take you to our refined drawing. And this is by Rudy Gardet. Now you can kind of get a real good idea of what it looked like inside the hangar. So bottom line is there were military personnel with rifles. Number 2, there was a Jeep there. There were 2 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy trucks with unknown tarp debris. Then there was this off-white, about 20-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that had 2 rings wrapped around the outer circumference and had tripod landing gear legs. And then there were 3 ET corpses laying on the hangar floor on stretchers. This is all from the report within the Leonard Stringfield book that I showed you earlier. Now, let's take this drawing as a template, and we'll go to the full color rendering. And this is what I came up with Joel Christopher Payne. I want to give him credit. So this is 1946. It's actually Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. And this is prior to Roswell here. So this is prior to Roswell. Let's continue on. Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, 1946. So same location, basically same time frame. The witness is a private. He worked in records management. The source is Space, the Final Frontier, page 59 by Clark McClellan. This is the cover of the book. Within the book, there is this sketch. that talks about something that was recovered from Arkansas and shipped on a railroad flat car all the way from Arkansas over to Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. Now, this thing was 15 feet in diameter, 7 feet tall. It had a flat section wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself. There were rectangular windows wrapped around the outer circumference. No visible means of propulsion, no seams, basically no welds, no rivets, no fasteners, no socket head cap screws, no hex head cap screws, a brushed aluminum exterior configuration. We go to the next slide here. This is my AutoCAD drawing that shows you what this craft looks like, give you all the dimensions. On the upper right-hand section, I've cut away the skin showing you this central column that was about 3 feet in diameter that went from the bottom of the craft through the midpoint, terminating at the lower section of the top of the craft itself. Now, I want to bring everyone's attention to the front view here. And if you go left of center of the central column, you'll see a red dot. That is the attempted point of entry where they're using diamond tip drill bits. I've got 3 additional cases within the string field files where they're talking about using diamond tip drill bits to get into these craft, and they can't do it. They can't do it. So this is case number 1 of those. This was my very first pass full color illustration, just to give you an idea of what this craft may have looked like back at the time. This is Joseph Ray's much more refined illustration. He's got the red dot there that shows you where the attempted point of entry with the diamond tip drill bits. He's also pulled away the skin, showing you this central column. Now, there were no seats in this thing. There was no central control panel. It was like antiseptically sterile on the inside of the craft itself. So here is the scene. You've got the private and records management. He had a friend who was an MP, and when he was delivering a letter to a high-level military brass, he was met with his MP, and his friend said, you know what? I've got something I want to show you. So he brings him back to the hangar, in the back section of the hangar, and this craft is just sitting on the hangar floor. He said that there was a partially folded up tarp off to the right. In the foreground, there was an open toolbox with an electric drill and a diamond tip drill bit in there. So this is the scene here. Now we want to use this as a guide. I'm going to take you to Joseph Ray's full color rendering, and this is what we came up with back in 1946, Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. Let's go on to the next one here. Now, who would have a need to know? Who would be someone that would be kind of in charge in this and absolutely have a need to know? Now, this is a letter from Nathan Twining to Air Force General George Shulgin, dated September 23rd, 1947. Here's what he said, quote, "The phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious." Later on in this document that you see here off to the right, he talks about the form, fit, and function of these vehicles. He talks about the flight path characteristics of these vehicles. So coming from Nathan Twining, it's a credible source. Let's continue on here. Papagos Indian Reservation, west of Globe, Arizona, January 1947. We're already 3-4 in. We're still not at Roswell yet. North of Superstition Mountains, witness served in the U.S. Navy during World War II. UFO crash retrievals, page 93, case A10. So if anyone wants to follow along and get all the intricate details, it's page 93, A10. So here you've got 2 military personnel. They're on this unimproved road in a Jeep. They're going down this road, and they are challenged and stopped by 2 MPs with rifles, telling them to get out of here immediately. You're not supposed to be here. This is a highly restricted retrieval operation, but it was already too late because these guys were at the right place at the right time when they were at the very beginning of a retrieval operation. Another 50 feet down this dirt road off to the left was a 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that augured in at a 40-degree angle. There was a low-rise dome on top. There was 2 rings wrapped around the outer circumference, and then what looked like indented windows wrapped around the outer circumference as well. So now they're told to get out of here immediately, which they ended up leaving the area. So I want to go to our full color rendering, and this gives you an idea of what this may have looked like back in 1947 at the very beginning of this retrieval operation. Now, I enjoy getting details about the crash retrievals. Absolutely. But I also want to know what happened to the hardware. So I've got a secondary project here. I want to know what happened to the hardware of all this. Within the Stringfield dictation notes, there was a reference that talked about Foote Brothers Gear and Machine Company. So according to Mr. Robert Helmold, Foote Brothers Gear and Machine Company of Chicago conducted metallurgical analysis on pieces from a saucer that crashed in Arizona back in 1947. So I decided to do some digging. I wanted to find out what this company actually does. So here's Chicago Tribune, January 15th, 1955. It says, the road to success. It makes gears as large as 21 feet in diameter and weighing 45,000 pounds and others small enough to put on a watch chain. Its gears are found on all airplanes of all types, including jets and helicopters. In a year, it will make thousands of different gears for use by industry. So it's beginning to check the boxes here. So I did some further research. This is Hendricks Commercial Register 1909. Now you get an idea of the size of the gears that this company makes. So if something crashed in the Arizona desert and it had an arc radius with some teeth on it that reminded the military personnel of a gear, you'd want to send it to this company for analysis. Completely checks all the boxes. This is Purchasing Agent 1923. You can see the size of the gears they make. So absolutely, this is checking all the boxes. They would absolutely have brought it to this company for analysis. Next one, White Sands Missile Range, July 4th, 1947. Our source is Technical Sergeant, U.S. Army Air Force, page 196 in the book. Now, what you're looking here at on this slide, the yellow section is the perimeter boundary of White Sands Missile Range. This thing came down at night on the northern part of the range. Here's Rudy's drawing. This thing was large, about 150 feet in diameter, came down at night at about a 20-degree angle on one of these sand dunes. Now, in the report, it said that the whole area was excruciatingly well lit. They had light-alls, they had spotlights, they had different lights coming down on this craft. They had people with Geiger counters walking around this craft. They had people with still cameras taking shots of this. They had other people who were operating motion picture film cameras. This, in other words, it was very well documented. Let me go to the next slide here. So this shows you what this may have looked like back in 1947. You can see all the spotlights and shining lights, the light elves coming down on this. Bottom line is excruciatingly well lit. So what is the takeaway from this particular case? Since still photography and motion picture film was recorded of this event, senators and congressmen with the appropriate security clearances should track down and utilize this event evidence for future public hearings. That's exactly what needs to happen here. Now, there's a couple of problems that we're running into, and this is all recent. Same problems we're running into now. The senators and congressmen in Washington, D.C. do not have a high enough security clearance to access this information, and they have not been read into these programs. So how can they get access to the information and the data if they've never even been read into the program? They haven't been read into the program, and they don't have a high enough security clearance. That's what we're running into today. UFO crash retrieval in 1947, seen at a warehouse at Berkeley University, of all places. We have this gentleman's name, Albert Bruce Collins, long deceased. He was a metallurgical engineer. Source, UFO crash retrievals, page 197. So we have our witness. He's at the right place at the right time when this 18-wheeler tractor trailer lowboy truck backs into the warehouse at Berkeley. I'm going to go to the next slide here. And here you can see him off to the left, backs into the warehouse at Berkeley University. Now, he said there's a lot of talk about egg-shaped UFOs with Jake Barber. This is another egg-shaped UFO. He said it absolutely was egg-shaped, 30 feet across, 15 feet high. It literally had a crack from top to bottom, essentially. And he said that there was a central egg yolk or core that was 36 inches in diameter. On the forward section of this egg, there was a composite panel. There was another composite panel that wrapped around the outer circumference of the central yoke or core. He also said that there was a hull breach on the side of the craft with what looked like shrapnel and debris sticking out, indicating there might have been an internal implosion going on with this. So let's take this as a guide. We'll go to the full color rendering, and this is what we came up with 1947 at Berkeley University. Let's continue on here. Now, carrot patch south of Salinas, California, July, August 1947. Seen by two 19-year-old workers in a remote nearby carrot patch field. So bottom line is this craft came down the night before. The foreman saw it. Next morning when the two 19-year-old workers show up, foreman comes over to him and said, hey guys, I think you better take a look at this. So they walk over and see this craft. Here is the original sketch that came with the report. It was not a large craft, 9 feet in diameter, 4 feet tall, had a double row of indented, what looked like porthole windows, and the top was flat. Again, only 9 feet in diameter. In this case, there was a map. So X marks the spot. We know exactly where this thing came down. If we could go back in time, I could probably get you within plus or minus 300 feet of where this thing actually came down. This was my first pass to AutoCAD rendering. This gives you an idea of the sizes and dimensions, not a large craft. This was the very first pass SolidWorks rendering, just to give you an idea of what this may have looked like. And I'm going to go to Rudy's drawing now. The two 19-year-old workers walked up to this craft, according to the report. One of them got up enough confidence to actually kick the side of it, so he made contact with it. Within 5 minutes, there was a convoy of military vehicles that showed up. So there were 2 Jeeps. There was a covered 6x6 troop transport that was basically towing a lowboy tractor trailer. So the 2 young boys are told to vacate the area, get out of here, but they did see the entire retrieval operation. They saw the military personnel manhandle this craft, put it on the trailer, put a tarp over it, secure it with chains, and then they were out of here. So that was the retrieval operation. Here's our full color rendering by Joel Christopher Payne. Gives you an idea of what this retrieval operation would look like according to the primary witness here. Now, what is the $64 million question we want to look at here? Where are the top secret files on UFO crash retrieval being stored? So we want to know about the files here. They are kept in 3 large computer banks spread throughout the country. Number 1, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Dayton, Ohio. It's not a surprise. We already knew that. Number 2, CIA headquarters, Langley, Virginia. Number 3, NSA headquarters, Fort Meade, Maryland. Now, this witness within the Steinfeld dictation notes, he made a cryptic remark regarding these files, and he says, quote, they will bend in any direction to keep them secret. So that's what we're up against. That's what we're up against. The concept of UFO crash retrievals was classified higher than the atomic bomb during World War II. It was classified above top secret. So that's where Timothy Good got the name of his book, Above Top Secret. It comes from this. Now, we talked about the files. What about where are the ET craft being stored? This is according to Stringfield military witnesses. Number 1, NSA headquarters, Fort Meade, Maryland. Number 2, MacDill Air Force Base, Tampa, Florida. Number 3, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Goldsboro, North Carolina. So if you want to see the bodies in the craft, this is where we need to go. We've got multiple locations. Obviously, what they did is early on, they diversified their portfolio. They had everything heading over to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, because of 2 reasons. Number 1, they have the Foreign Technology Division there. They can test the tensile strength of the material recovered. Number 2, they have the Aeromedical Lab there, so they can look at biological tissue samples. That's the reason for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Now, C-119 flying boxcar. This is Sierra Madre Valley, Mexico, prior to 1951. And I think this will probably be our last case here because we're running out of time. Our witness is an engineer who worked in highway construction. This is page 32 in Leonard's book. This thing was 9 feet in diameter. So what you're looking at here is a period correct C-119 flying boxcar. And we know for certain the maximum diameter of this craft that was recovered was no more than 9 feet in diameter. We know for it for sure. How do we know that? Because if you take a tape measure and you measure the interior wall thickness dimension, it's 9 feet 10 inches. So if you have a craft that's 9 feet in diameter, that allows you for 5 inches of clearance on either side. So this thing cannot be any larger than 9 feet across. That's how we arrived at those numbers here. So here's Rudy's drawing. This shows you the clamshell doors open on the C-119. They're kind of hoisting this thing up on an inclined plane, getting ready to close the clam doors here. Let's go to the next one. Here's Joseph Ray and his full color rendering. This shows you the clamshell bay doors opened up, the retrieval operation. I'm going to go to the next slide here. Now you can see a blow up of the craft itself, and they're kind of pushing this thing up into the cargo bay of the C-119. Now, the primary eyewitness said that there were 3 deceased bodies recovered. And when he knelt down, this is in the report, which I thought was very interesting. He knelt down and touched their faces. Their skin came off on their fingers. So they were burnt pretty bad here. Let's go to the next one here. Now, I've got a world exclusive. I haven't shown this anywhere else but this before, but here is our more refined, more realistic rendering to make this even more true here. So here you see the entire scene. You've got the C-119 flying boxcar off to the left. We're going to zoom into this thing. I'm going to take you kind of inside here of the loading process. Let's zoom in a little bit closer here. Now you can kind of see the clamshell bay doors opened up. Let's do one further JPEG. We're going to go down about 15 degrees, and I'm going to take you over here. Now you can see the retrieval operation here. Let's go one more. I'm going to blow this up a little bit. Now you can see them pushing the craft into the back clamshell bay doors. And I've got time for one more slide here for the bodies. And this is what they look. This was not for the faint of heart. This is something that would affect you mentally for quite some time. This is according to the military witness that was basically discovered by Leonard Steinfeld. So in this presentation, what I wanted to do, just kind of give you a brief overview of the mission critical crash retrieval cases within the Steinfeld collection. Now, the goal of all of this is to preserve our history, the history that we paid for, preserve our history through the use of drawings, sketches, illustrations, and full color renderings. And if we can do that, and if we can identify the last of the remaining legacy military firsthand witnesses by Leonard Steinfeld, if we can get to their bosses in open congressional hearings, then we can really move this ball forward. And I want to thank you for your attention.
Talk about disclosure. This is exactly the bottom line of disclosure right here, Michael, right? I mean, this needs to be put forward at the start, the baseline, right? I mean, wouldn't you say that? And also Patterson, who owned National Cash Register, got into the Wright field. So that's why it's Wright Patterson. Patterson was a really rich guy who probably had access to all these UFO secrets when he merged with the Wright field in Dayton. So, I
mean, back at the time, Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio was the clearinghouse for all of this. I mean, it absolutely, everything came to Wright Field, and later on they discovered we have to diversify our portfolio. We can't keep everything in one area, and that's what they did. They started farming out craft to different locations. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Edwards North Base, Eglin Air Force Base. This is exactly what they've done.
So Michael, are you saying that this was happening before they started sourcing them out to different areas? This is before Roswell?
Yeah, we've got multiple cases prior to Roswell, 1942. We've got Cape Girardeau, 1941. So many cases prior to Roswell, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do you know what's the oldest case that you've come across?
Well, if you'd believe Dave Grush, which there does appear to be some meat on the bones here, we could go back to 1933 in Italy. Eventually, the Vatican was involved in that. The Pope was involved in that. The United States government got involved in that. So we can go back to 1933.
Someone asked about Jackie Gleason. Where was it that Jackie Gleason showed Richard Nixon the bodies?
Yeah, that was Homestead Air Force Base. Homestead Air Force Base.
And now it's not there anymore. the thing I want to say about Patterson, he owned National Cash Register. He was one of the richest people in the country because their cash registers were everywhere. So there must have been some technological development NCR did with some of that reverse engineering, right?
Probably, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Right. Okay. So
what would you say,
anyway,
Michael, to, a lot of people when say that I post a video online of declassified video, even if it's the Nimitz incident or other ones, because more have come out now, and a lot of people they throw the baby out with the bathwater because they say, oh, that's one of ours, and then all of a sudden it's kind of like we don't even need to interact with it anymore. This isn't ET, it's just one of ours. But in my mind, isn't one of ours a reverse engineered craft that came from something otherworldly? What's your opinion?
Yeah, that's why they call them alien reproduction vehicles. There is an origin to this phenomenon. There absolutely is. The only thing I'm saying is when you look at the form, fit, and function of a lot of these craft, for example, you talk about the Nimitz, you talk about the Tic Tac. When I was at the Gray Barker collection in Clarksburg, West Virginia, I pulled up an auto binder report from 1964 that taught, this is in Pennsylvania, what this woman saw was something that looked like a water boiler. It looked like a Tic Tac. And then she said it had 6 prongs sticking up from the side of it. And at the end of each prong, there was a little sphere. Now, if you compare, this is 1964, if you compare that to the high-res video that was taken of the Nimitz event, it also, the Tic Tac also has these prongs sticking out of it as well. So this technology dates a lot earlier than I think we all realize.
Let me ask you a question about a point you brought up. If the American people are paying the military basically to do these crash retrievals, and they're giving those crash retrievals to private industry, and private industry is capitalizing on the reverse engineering, making fortune, doesn't that money belong to the American people? Isn't it highly illegal?
See, you're very well connected. I like the direction you're going down here. See, that's the dirty deal. That's the dirty deal that the United States government made with the defense contractors. So basically, they said, we only want to know 2 things. Number one, we want to know about the free energy applications that are associated with the propulsion systems of these vehicles. And we want to know about the weapons advanced technology that we can exploit from these vehicles. And so what they did is they told the defense contractors, we don't care what you need to do. You can trickle down this technology, you can commercialize it. All we want to know are those 2 things. And that's the dirty deal they did. And so what they did is they moved it out of a top secret classification and they moved it into a privatized defense contractor proprietary facility. And that's why FOIAs will not get to it, because they won't go to proprietary. And that's what they've done.
Part of that dirty deal, I think, is that whoever gave that to the defense contractors is getting a kickback privately, right?
Sure,
so someone in the Pentagon is making money about dealing these craft, and so that's highly illegal too. Because it belongs to the American people. That's the thing we need to demand. How do we go about doing that?
Yeah, well, it's important that we track down these final legacy witnesses, because this is the final curtain call on UFO crash retrievals. It literally is the final curtain call. Almost all of these first-hand military witnesses, they're almost all dead. That's why it's incumbent upon us to track down Leonard's legacy witnesses before they're all gone. And at that point, it will be cover-up complete, according to the government. That's why it's important to track these people down.
I was really pleased when I put together a talk about a year ago that exoconsciousness is now in 5 different online dictionaries. So that's really exciting. That means that it's been mainstreamed into the common vernacular that humans use. And there are other exoconscious groups. For example, we work closely with Exoconscious Brazil. So today, again, I am focusing my discussion on this real disclosure conference from a perspective of a contactee from childhood, from a perspective as an exoconscious human. So I'll be bringing up some different perspectives of where I see, or we see, disclosure headed. So really the 3 points are, I believe that the intel military threat op has been toppled. I believe that they've done a psionic pivot because of that, and that we exoconscious humans have not only a response, but an incredible opportunity right now to move our message and our mission and our innovations and ideas forward. So the past intel military threat narrative really kicked off in 2017 with a New York Times article, the $22 million that was spent to research UFOs and extraterrestrials. And that article, which if you go on my website, exoconsciousness.com, even at the time, we as an Institute for Exoconsciousness wrote a response to what exactly was going on with that threat narrative. And we said at the time, UFOs, extraterrestrials are not a threat, they're an opportunity. And we continue to view it that way today. I think this might be a good time to just stop and say that one of the things we value in exoconsciousness is critical thinking abilities, analysis, and a lot of discernment. So we choose to contact, communicate, and co-create with beings, once again, extraterrestrial, multidimensional spiritual beings that can advance us as humans. So there's been a lot of advancement, as we all know, in the world of AI, in the world of transhumanism, digital currencies. And what we're seeing now is there's also, in a lockstep almost, an advancement of natural human consciousness. So it's almost like these forces, whether they're geomagnetic or DNA, that are coming into the world right now, maybe solar flares, realignment in the cosmos, astrology, whatever you want to call it, that it's actually moving forward to different agendas that may in the future come together. So with the 2017 New York Times article, there was an immediate shift in reality. It's like someone turned a dial. So we weren't really allowed to say UFO anymore. Remember, I think Hillary Clinton went on some kind of a comedy show at night and just kind of stumbling around trying to say UAP. So all of a sudden, it's like you can't talk about UFOs anymore. You have to call them UAPs, and you can't talk about extraterrestrials. You have to call them NHI or non-human intelligence. So whenever there's a word change, just red flag here, whenever there's a word change, that's to steer human consciousness in a certain direction. So a lot of people joined the UAP threat op. And over these past years, since 2017, we've watched people that got great payoffs. They got New York Times bestseller book deals that had the threat narrative. They had films and television shows that were based on intel military experts. A lot of mainstream news coverage, put out a New York Times bestseller book, and all of a sudden you're on the Today Show, CBS This Morning. You're on all of the great shows that, we normal exoconscious humans don't have a prayer of doing that. All of a sudden they have top podcast interviews, Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson. They have speaking engagements from Silicon Valley, the Soul Foundation, to the SALT conferences in Wall Street, where a group of military intel insiders go and try to sell the deal of the decade to Wall Street investors. It's just very interesting how it's just woven into the whole collective cultural weave. There's these payoffs that were given. If you followed the UAP op, that chances were you were going to get a payoff. And then, of course, along with the SALT conferences, there's was investment opportunities. We're launching it's To the Stars initiative. We're going to launch these shares of stock, and you can buy these shares of stock or join our institute for $1,000, and you're going to get insider knowledge, or you're going to get the the exotic technology we're going to build. Well, none of that really ever proves to be true. And then the overriding umbrella of the threat narrative was market manipulation, primarily through social media, as well as films and books and media coverage. Much of this was led by UAP charismatic personalities. And one of the things these charismatic personalities did, all of them were like intel or military personalities, was they heightened the threat narrative. So they showcased the threat narrative, which in turn also showcased how important they were, like all the three-letter agencies that they belonged to, all the insider skiffs that they could attend because they had this high clearance. So it's just heightened this threat narrative with their personality. They all received payoffs. All the payoffs were directed to them. And of course, I don't know if you follow X. If you follow X, it's kind of devolved into this military intel people yelling at each other and calling each other out. It's kind of like the mean boys instead of mean girls. So all that drama, what's it do? We click on it, we tune into the drama, we sort of participate in the drama, and you get more likes on social media because of the drama. So they kind of pulled the drama card here recently. So what happened then to independent researchers? What happened to independent UFO researchers that for years, decades upon decades, had spent their life researching UFOs? What happened to those people? Most of them that I know all decided to join the UAP threat narrative because they thought there was going to be a payoff there. But those that didn't suffered, those independent researchers that didn't, they really suffered a decline in independent research. The money dried up, the conference engagements dried up. Many of them were shadow banned. I don't know if you know what shadow ban means. Shadow ban means that if you post on X, you'll get maybe 2 people will read your post or 20 people will read your post. If you're intel military, 10s, 20s, 30,000 of people will read your post. So in effect, the algorithm on a social media platform then is shadow banning what you have to say, and instead giving intel military personalities prominence. So what's the issues with the threat disclosure? For me, I would say that since 2017, that the threat disclosure really has deteriorated. I just want to put a plug in here for Exoconscious Brazil, because we had a wonderful talk with Juliana Pizzotti, and the pivotal chapter of Lou Elizondo's book, Imminent, Threat Imminent, was the Colares Brazil incident. And Juliana just did an amazing job taking apart, actually, that chapter of the book and showing that it was not at all a UFO attack as it was meant to be. So also poor quality images of UAPs have been presented. Chandeliers. I mean, I don't know if you saw on X the picture of the chandelier, Jake Barber's egg drop, and then it kind of comes out later. And he said, I didn't really man that helicopter. And the Tic Tac video, of course, that people had seen that for years. And unfortunately, most independent researchers received no credit for their prior work. Everything was just kind of scooped up, maybe by Langley. I don't know who scooped, but a lot of their independent research was just scooped up. And it's kind of how, if you write a book today and you do a lot of research, it just gets scooped up into AI. The same thing happened to independent researchers, UFO researchers. I think the real peak narrative collapse for UAPs was in late December, early January of late December 2024, early January 2025. The magnificent display of drone flyovers in late 2024 across New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, targeting civilian and military sites. Claims of drones from Iranian motherships and spy drones from China and spy balloons from China. And then the coup de grace was Las Vegas car incident, Tesla truck or something bombing incident on January 1st, where a U.S. Special Forces member was killed, and it was all tied into the UAP and the drones and the threats. So I think that was just sort of like a fireworks display. That's what I saw it as, the drones, the orbs, a car explosion, and of all places, Las Vegas hotel. Just really mass hysteria. It's like a fireworks all of a sudden to like, look at us. And then I think actually the UAP threat operation kind of flatlined. I think it sort of drew back, and especially after that firework of the threat disclosure, I think it didn't go over well. People didn't really pay much attention to it. And so then January 20th, Trump administration comes in, and I have a lot of family and friends, and I worked for 6 years with Dr. Edgar Mitchell in Washington, D.C. So I know a little bit about what's going on in D.C. right now because our family still lives there. And I have a lot of work colleagues that live there and work there. So Trump came in and the shift came, the dial got turned. So the focus began to be global trade and fiscal conservatism, outing fraud, waste, abuse, trying to balance the budget. I don't know if that's a reality. And then a shift towards peace and national sovereignty. So trade versus war. And also an emphasis on expensive CIA, Pentagon, UAP threat ops. The budgetary impact on intelligence agencies right now, I think that really has not been written about very much. But if people are familiar with USAID is a CIA cutout that managed ops around the world under the auspices of NGOs and nonprofits. Many of them were influencing elections, influencing politics in other countries under the auspices of doing well for other countries. And that took a direct budgetary hit to the CIA. So many of those programs have been canceled. Many people in Washington, D.C. today had their entire professional careers wrapped up in the CIA, State Department, USAID programs. And now they don't have a job. And now they don't have funding. And I don't really know. It's almost like the Rust Belt meets Washington, D.C., and nobody ever thought it was going to happen. I come from the Rust Belt, Dayton, Ohio. When I first lived in Dayton, Ohio, there were 7 Fortune 500 companies. When I left in 1992, there was 1. So we're talking about an incredible loss of professional lives, incredible loss of personal lives, and the whole moving of manufacturing and professional life into the global economy, offshoring it, and America becoming a service industry. Also, there's some accountability in the Pentagon. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but we address the intelligence agencies. I don't know if people are familiar with Mike Benz. His last name is Benz. He's done magnificent research on what happened with USAID, how it was used as a CIA cutout. To be well informed, you should truly follow Mike Benz. I can't recommend him enough. So recently, the Pentagon just failed its 7th audit in a row. We've all put up with this for obviously 7 years. So I don't know what's going to happen with that, but that's definitely going to whether it's Intel and the CIA or it's the Pentagon and the military, these changes that came in with the Trump administration are going to affect disclosure from those people, from the Intel military people. So here's just a thing on a recent thing I pulled up on X. Washington, D.C. initial jobless claims. You can see February 22nd, 2025. They're just going through the ceiling. People in D.C. are living in shock and awe and trauma, and don't really know what's going to happen with them. And I don't think D.C. has ever known anything like this. And it's definitely going to affect the intel military UAP threat narrative because it's not going to have the financial backing anymore. So when things fall apart, it's time for a pivot. So that's where we move from craft threat, the UAP craft threat, to psionics consciousness. This picture, Why Psionics, Why Now, comes from a Substack, series of Substack articles I've been writing. There's 4 actual articles in the Substack. And this is the cover of the first Substack. My Substack's free. It's just Rebecca Hardcastle Wright. It's Substack. Please join. Please come to the Substack and read and participate in this community. So in February 23rd, 2025, Jim Garrison pulls together a psionics conference with a lot of very interesting people. But the thing I pulled out of this conference is Jim Garrison says, explain in your own words what you mean by psionics. And Jake Barber, known for the egg helicopter video and Russ Cohart interviews, his response to define psionics is, it's kind of a fun word. You can play with this thing, but this is really what he's saying. It's digital intelligence or digital consciousness. Note the word digital, because we're going to get into that. So anytime, again, there's terminology changes in ufology from UFO to UAP, extraterrestrial to NHI, non-human consciousness. And I bet most people, if you would say, what's NHI mean? They'd have no idea. You ask them what extraterrestrial or ET means, they tell you in a nanosecond. So there was a reason that these words are changed. And then we move from exoconsciousness or psychic abilities to psionics, another shift. And all of these word shifts, I know a lot of people have written about how language is spelling. So it's like casting a magical spell. It impacts our perception. Words impact our perception. They impact our influence. They influence our thinking and belief, and they steer our consciousness in a certain direction. So I'm doing ETs in this direction, and now I'm doing NHI, that nobody knows what that is, in this direction. So it's steering how I'm thinking, how I'm talking, what kind of talk is permitted online and social media. So it has a huge influence on human consciousness. So psionics becomes kind of an intel military word game at that point. What psionics really is, it came from science fiction in the 1930s. John W. Carpenter used it. I write about it in my Substack. Who was this man that brought forth this word psionics? You can kind of read about his childhood and who he was and why he brought forth that word psionics. But bottom line, psionics is engineering principles applied to paranormal phenomenon. So engineering principles, cybernetics, computers, implants, brain to computer interfaces, voice to skull consciousness, all of those are engineering principles, okay? It also includes extrasensory perception, telepathy, and psychokinesis. And I feel like we're going to just, I mean, if the 60s and 70s were the era of drugs and drugs pouring into the human mind, I think 2025 is going to really kick off the era of implants and brain to computer technology going into the human mind. And that's what psionics is. So it's digital consciousness, digital intelligence. So it's not natural human intelligence. It's digital intelligence. It's AI intelligence. It's avatar intelligence. It's cybernetics intelligence. It's computer intelligence. It's not natural human intelligence. And it prepares humans for a computerized consciousness. So it also prepares humans for what I call the advancement of transhumanism. And my last book that I wrote, actually while I was living in Washington, D.C., was when I started that book, I began to be told information and that led to research about transhumanism. And I was frankly floored to the point where it took me about 2 years to come off my trauma and be able to write the book. But it's called Exoconscious Humans: Will Free Will Survive in an Increasingly Non-Human World? And transhumanism, if you don't know what that is, it's a belief. It's a belief that natural human consciousness needs technological advancements and technological additions in order to evolve. So I need my cell phone in order to evolve. I may need an implant in order to evolve. I may need brain to computer interface in order to evolve. I may need some kind of genetic engineering in order to evolve. That's transhumanism as opposed to natural human consciousness. So the psionic pivot was taken by military intel. They've been working on this for a long time, and they've got all the patents, quite frankly. So it's the integration of technology to enhance human bodies, minds, and environments, beginning to familiarize people with life with robots and advanced data mining. So every time you're on the social media, your data is being mined. What you're looking at, what you're talking about, what you're posting. What kind of frequency, emotional frequency you're emitting is also being taken up. It's also getting us ready. The psionic pivot is also getting us ready for future innovations in surveillance and synthetics and digital biology, and acceptance of what Jake Barber called digital consciousness and digital intelligence, and living with robots. So we often think that computers were designed to be like humans, but that's really not true. In cybernetics, we learned that humans are designed to be like computers. So that's an inversion, actually, of what we were told. So this is part of the psionic pivot. In my second Substack, I go into the game of psionics. Psionics was big in online gaming. So it's using games like Dungeons and Dragons, Bureau 13, Champion Hero Systems. And people that play these games were also given a message that they have these superhuman abilities when they're playing the game. So they're telepathic, they're telekinetic, they're precognitive. But they only have these superhuman abilities when they're playing the game. And I want you to remember that. You're only superhuman when you're in psionics, when you're playing the game. So it's a closed loop to gain abilities, and you lose them if you don't play. So this all goes back to a very important concept called game theory by John von Neumann. He was a mathematician, brilliant mathematician. And what game theory does, and that's the basis of online gaming or any kind of video gaming, is it studies strategic decisions in competitive settings. You win, I lose. Okay? So participants' reactions are monitored, and it doesn't matter in the game, whether you're playing a video game or whether you're in the psionics game, this digital consciousness game. It doesn't matter if you're aware you're in it or you're not aware in it. You can still be playing it and not know. That's really important. So there's a real neurological brain impact of game theory. So it's a battle for your mind using perceptions, rules, and patterns. And the field of psionic gaming then is structured by social media and Hollywood entertainment and news structures the field. So it's a zero-sum game. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's a zero-sum game. So I see what's happening right now in terms of disclosure as a choice. You're going to be an exoconscious human, or you're going to be a psionics human, transhuman. So exoconscious vision of advanced natural consciousness, where you focus on your natural psychic intelligence that all of us have. And that includes contact, communication, and co-creation with nature, beings, as well as the cosmos. Or are you going to be a psionic transhuman? So are you going to live in a game world, live in a virtual reality, an artificial reality created by AI technology and implants or brain to computer interfaces? And with that, you're given the promise of you fit in, you're popular, you're given the promise of the payoff of digital intelligence, that if I use ChatGPT and I have a ChatGPT agent, I'm going to be smarter than the average bear. But I'm also going to have immortality. I'm going to live forever. So there's a lot of payoffs in psionics. So let's just give some examples of what a natural human would be compared to a psionic human. So an exoconscious human would go out and buy organic produce. A psionic transhuman would go out and buy GMO produce. Let's look at it in entertainment. An exoconscious human would go to a local theater production or a local concert. A psionic transhuman would stay home and watch hours of streaming or of AI-generated film or hours of video games. So intelligence develop. Exoconscious humans, and I can't emphasize this enough. Exoconsciousness is a slow, organic, growing phenomenon. It doesn't happen overnight. It's slow growth, it's human, and it's real. Transhumans will want quick artificial reality. I'm going to go take a ketamine journey. I'm going to play a video game. I'm going to watch everything that the Intel military tells me about disclosure. Living in a quick artificial reality, I'm going to get a payoff. That's the difference. So let's go to zero-sum games. This is a really important critical thinking aspect to bring into what psionics is. So in a zero-sum game, there's one loser and one winner. Okay, it's more complex than that, but for this talk, there's one winner and one loser. Once again, you can be aware you're a winner or loser or not aware. So whoever controls the system wins. So let's go back to the military intel controlling of the system. They have the AI, they have the algorithms, they have the electromagnetics, they have the social media, they have the weapons system, they have the banking system. They've got the entire field. Natural humans do not. That's a zero-sum game. That's why we get shadow banned. That's why we get ignored for now, just for now. So that's a zero-sum game. Only one team can win the Super Bowl. And not right now, it's AI, it's AI, social media with military intel. So there's been a deliberate psionic pivot. So as I talked about, there's been a deliberate replacement of terms. Psionic is replacing psychic intelligence, or exoconsciousness. It fits the age of reconnaissance, surveillance, drones, orbs, builds a comfort level in us, and it's dropping the control grid. So it's composed of social, genetic, geoengineered reality, and it penetrates our human relationships and our relationships with off-world beings or interdimensional beings, and affects our biological genetic composition as well as the Earth's environment. So once again, this is like a four-part Substack, a psionic series that I'm presenting. So what's the psionic disclosure win? Why did they pivot? We can see actually today and this weekend at South by Southwest Film Festival of the Age of Disclosure, we can see how the pivot happened. So instead of talking about seeing craft, the movie is primarily about the threat personalities of military intelligence and what their contact experiences are. So leading masses to summoning craft, using plasma drones and orbs. Let's face it, our military has very advanced plasma weapons, very advanced plasma orbs. They can create an orb. So the whole orb discussion takes on a different a different intelligence, a different intellectual framework when you go into what science and the military knows about plasma. People in the movie talked about that UFOs lived in their house for years, but they never took any photos. One of them claimed to become an angel or a demon and go out and haunt terrorists. Lots of talk about hitchhiker poltergeist, attaching to the personalities to spook them and their family. A lot of talk about voices inside their head. Friends, voice to skull technology is 64 years old. It's nothing new. If you hear a voice inside your head, you need to be discerning about it. If you're getting hitchhiker poltergeist in your house, you need to think and discern, what kind of beings are you summoning? Are you summoning benevolent, caring beings? Are you engaged with some kind of black magic, some kind of manipulation into black magic? So these are some of the stars of the zero-sum game. I want to read to you what Variety said about it, because Variety Variety is a magazine from Hollywood. It's a Hollywood magazine. So the Variety review of The Age of Disclosure said, when are we actually going to be shown something that looks more like than a dupe of an old video game? Variety picked it up right away. They're giving out a dupe of an old video game depicting blurry black dots of an alien spaceship cruising over the water at what looks like to be about 300 miles an hour. Whoever wrote this Variety review hit the nail on the head. We're looking at an old video game. Gaming is the linchpin of psionics. So what's our strategy? What's our strategy of exoconscious humans? Do not play this psionics game. That's a strategy. Intel military psionics game, they're going to win-win. When you consciously choose not to play, that ensures a better outcome. So how do exoconscious post-disclosure humans address the situation? Number one, we're going to live outside the psionic game of digital consciousness. Do not engage. The primary use of exoconsciousness is human freedom. Personal, spiritual, emotional, physical, and mental freedom. Third, secure a realistic maximum control over your life. Live fully as a human in the world. Secure human rights and secure the freedom of nature. I don't go into it here, but there's something called the Philo Code that was developed in the 1970s to actually encode, barcode, digitalize, and make synthetic changes to all of nature. So we're not only advocating to secure our human rights, we're advocating also for the freedom of nature. Exoconscious humans believe in the freedom to experience contact. This is Exo TLC. It's done by Yvonne Donaldson in our group. It's beautiful meditations on our Exoconscious Humans YouTube. Please visit our Exoconscious Humans YouTube and listen to her beautiful meditations that are just so timely for what we're going through right now. And she does such beautiful meditations for our freedom to be independent, curious, and intelligent, to have critical thinking, to have discernment as exoconscious humans, but to be grounded and centered on the earth and within the cosmos. So once again, we need to support co-creation as exoconscious humans. That's our path forward. Your story, your contact, it's all really important. But your co-creation, what you're doing with that contact, what you're doing with those mission, with that mission that you were given, what you're doing with the downloads, what you're doing with the information that you were given. And this little purple highlights YouTube that we have on our Exoconscious Humans YouTube, done by Nick Prestera. who co-created a consciousness technology. And he was given an assignment: create a spiritual energy tool with consciousness. That was his assignment, and he did it. And you can follow Nick's videos on our YouTube channel. It's fascinating. So we encourage, once again, we contact, community, and communicate and co-create with ETs that have our personal growth in mind and assist others to achieve that goal. We have honest and open community communication. We have exoconscious individuals, near-death experiencers, psychics, mediums, remote viewers, energy workers, and healers. So our exoconscious future is we're creating a new timeline of sovereignty, psychic intelligence, free will, and speech. And exoconscious humans are becoming visible voices in the mainstream. Exoconscious YouTube channel, please subscribe and like to our YouTube channel. We have so much important information coming forward. We are co-creating a natural human telepathic network through our exoconscious community. And every week we talk about how that's being enhanced and how that's growing. We're here to provide co-created antidotes to the engineered chaos that we're living in right now. And a very important part of our work is how exoconscious humans are going to guide our Earth and space future. And one of the things that we think we bring space and space agencies is experiencers have had out-of-body travel. We've dealt with missing time. We've created consciousness crafts. We've driven consciousness crafts. We've been matter that's dissolved and moved through walls. And we believe that we as a group know the needs and perspectives of extraterrestrial, extraplanetary species. And so to that end, we wrote a planetary constitution. You can find it on our Exoconscious Humans website. It's beautiful. We also have a video that's going with that. So join us at exoconsciousness.com, our coaching groups, our YouTube. The Substack that I'm referring to is Rebecca Hardcastle Wright at substack.com. And if you'd like, if you join our Substack, it's free. For $8 a month, you can join our monthly coaching group. It has a lot of exciting exoconscious opportunities and potentials to it with a paid Substack subscription. But once again, it's